Well, if you don't know, we're about to tell you. Cool. So affirmative action is basically a tool for promoting equal opportunity for all people who have historically faced educational, economic, and institutional barriers to achieving success. Historically, women, Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Asian American people have all benefited from affirmative action programs that have been institutionalized. So in countering discrimination, affirmative action policies really attempt to give everyone an opportunity to reach their full potential and to reach like the higher ladder. So Refilwe, do you wanna just get that video started for all of our visual learners like myself?
Are folks able to hear? I don't know if I pressed optimize for sound. Is that good? What? Okay.
I think if you put your volume up, it should, the sound should come on.
Oh, you know what it is? It's my headphones. Okay, so I'm also gonna just press the optimize to make sure. All right. Part 2.
In California, we believe that everyone should have an opportunity to thrive with fair wages, good jobs, and quality schools. But the truth is, a wealthy few are overrepresented in positions of power. While many Californians are discriminated against because of what they look like or where they're from, women do the same work as men, but are paid 80 cents for every dollar. Women of color and single moms are paid even less. And while small businesses are the backbone of our economy, nearly all government contracts are awarded to large companies run by older white men. Despite their hard work, women and people of color are not given the same opportunities. Prop 16 would give everyone a fair shot at rising to the top. We could close the wage gap by making sure women and people of color are employed and promoted fairly. We could ensure that government contracts are equitably awarded and that everyone has access to a quality public education. We are in a historic moment as we fight for racial justice and to protect those hit hardest by COVID-19. Together, we can take a stand against discrimination and reshape our systems so all Californians have the opportunity to thrive.
All right.
Ooh. Thank you, Refilwe. Cool. So, yeah, so actually, for all of us that don't know, affirmative action actually has its roots in the civil rights movement of the 1960s when Black activists actually pushed President Kennedy to pass the first affirmative action in an executive order that actually helped to pave the way for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And of course, it did a lot more than that. But now we are only one of 9 states in the entire country who have a ban on affirmative action and equal opportunity programs. And that puts us in the same place as Texas, Florida, Michigan, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, and Idaho. And actually, fun fact, Texas actually rescinded their decision in 2003. So they no longer have it. So as of now, I believe it's only 8 states. So yeah, do you want to go ahead? So we believe that Proposition 16 is really going to close the chapter on what was Prop 209. So Proposition 209 passed in 1996 when it actually banned affirmative action practices in public hiring, in contracting, and in education. So this proposition was passed during the time of Governor Pete Wilson, who was a Republican governor here in California, who was actually running to be on the Republican ticket to be president. So he launched his campaign in 1995. And in a bid to really gather a base of supporters, he executed an executive order that basically was the initiation to create a ban on equal opportunity programs. And it specifically targeted public contracting in the state. So this proposition, Prop 209, was something that was supported by Ronald Reagan and the Wall Street interests that followed, and that actually are targeting us now, today. And since then, since 1996, this is the first that we've come to actually repealing Prop 209. There's been several attempts in the legislature to repeal this proposition, but we haven't gotten as far as we have today. And that wouldn't be without the support of many organizations, like including like yourselves, who are giving us the space here today to continue to talk about this. Next slide, please. So again, like, we really believe the Proposition 16 has the potential to begin, like, as a first step to dismantle the structural racism and sexism that is holding our communities back, which is why we need your support.
So exactly what would Prop 16 do? If this bill passes, what exactly would it mean? It would mean that California could actually take into account gender and race among factors when making decisions about, like mentioned, government contracts, education, and hiring. And not in necessarily a legalized discrimination way. We'll get to, I think, myth busting throughout this presentation, but it really would allow California to align with, like Maria said, not 41, but 42 other states that already allow these practices to happen. I'd also add that these are like practices that are particularly prohibited to like public institutions. A lot of private institutions are still able to essentially use affirmative action in their own ways. And so it would allow us to also take on the gender gap, and we'll talk about how right now. And so in order to be able to fill the gap, it's a gap which, by the way, along race really differs. I think you all may have heard like the 70% number a lot, right? Like women make 70% on the dollar that men make, but that's actually white women make 70% of the dollar that white men make. And as you can see, when the spectrum of our communities are taken into consideration, that disparity is even greater. And so what affirmative action would allow is for race and gender to be considered in hiring and promotions. And so by closing the promotion and leadership gap for women and women of color specifically, we believe that will also ensure that there's a closing gap in wage pay and discrimination. Additionally, in education, for K through 12 education, currently the funding source that our local schools get funds from is able to consider things like low income status of students, language differentiation of various students, but affirmative action would allow for different race factors to be considered in terms of like what resources schools will need. And so it'll be able to better actually fit the needs of our various communities by actually addressing and acknowledging them in the way that resources and funds are distributed. Very similarly, in higher education, it'll ensure that college students who need the support the most can get it. Reflecting on my own experience as a Black college student, I can think of different programs such as like we need Black psychologists, or we want Black housing, and all of these things that as a Black student and Black student union we were organizing for. And one of the many obstacles in that is, oh, actually we're not allowed to select based on that, or we're not allowed to give you and give the community resources based off of race, when in actuality it was kind of more considering our various experiences and shared lived reality. And then in public contracting, as of now, minority-based women are getting about 57% of the amount of contracts that they should be eligible for. And so once affirmative action was outlawed and Prop 209 passed, there was a 79% drop in contracts for women-owned businesses. And so like after they were like, oh, we can no longer consider race and gender when giving contracts, and this thing that we had that leveled the playing field generation before us is no longer true. And so now that was an 80% drop, which now leaves us into about 50% of the work that they could be getting is the work that they are getting. And then when it comes to employment, I think I'm going to allow Maria to talk about that because our own union has very specific examples about the ways that that would impact public sector workers.
So of course, as Refilwe very beautifully mentioned, our Black communities, Latino communities, women are severely impacted by affirmative action or lack thereof as of right now. So California, as you know, it's a very, very diverse state, but our workforce does not reflect that. As of right now, white men are overrepresented in leadership, which means that they're the ones holding the higher offices, they're the ones getting paid more, where women and women of color are at the lowest of the ladder. And individual cities right now cannot fix that because of Prop 209 and the ban on these affirmative action programs. So that means that they are unable to, on their own, fix discriminatory and hiring practices, and they're not able to fix the pay gap like on their own because they don't have the tools to do so. So for example, like in LA, women city employees are paid 66 cents to the dollar of a man, and they're outnumbered 2-1. So Prop 2 is going to change that. We're hoping to give legislators and give cities the tools that they need to be able to ensure that women have equal opportunities to men, and they're given raises and promotions. So this is really, like, Prop 16 would really allow cities and localities to be able to fix these issues on their own. Let me see. Sorry, I got lost here. You can go back, sorry. So like Refilwe said, like in just talking about UC, actually like our membership, we have 27,000 members at UC, and we are the most diverse constituency. That includes constituencies of students, staff at all levels, and we are actually the lowest paid workers at UC. We represent patient care and service workers, and they're the lowest paid at UC, like I said. And since affirmative action was banned in 1996, we have seen a steady decline in the Black workforce within our membership. So in 1986, 90% of 3299 workers at UC were Black. And by 2015, there was only 12%. So in terms of just like membership, that was a 37% decline. Like I said, like we are the most diverse constituency, but we're also the lowest paid, which puts us at basically like a $2 paid difference from women to men in their own categories. Like if they're patient care workers, like men are paid $2 more than women are paid, like within their own departments. And we've seen that really patient care and service workers have historically been placed in a pathways to the middle class. But these wage disparities have really created inequalities and immobility within UC. And fun fact, UC is actually the third largest employer in California. So their decisions in employment directly impact the entire state, which means that their hiring practices are reflected not only in public contracting, but in the private sector and at all levels in the cities and localities. So a few more fun facts that are not actually so fun for us is that Black women within our constituencies face the greatest income inequalities, where depending on whether they are service or patient care workers, respectively, on average, their starting wages for a Black woman are 10 to 23% lower than a white man. So just in terms of numbers, this is a difference between about $3,900 to $15,000 a year. So that means that Black women are really missing out on like thousands and thousands of dollars when compared to their counterparts in the same position at the same level. And Black women in the patient care industry specifically need to work 14 years to reach the starting pay of a white man in their same position again. For a Latina patient care worker, it takes 13 years to reach the starting salary of a white man. So just within our membership, like I mentioned several times now, we're the most diverse segment of UC's workforce, with 79% of our members being non-white and 56% being women. But again, we don't hold those offices that are reflective of our membership and of our state constituency. So yeah, those are some just quick fun facts about our members within UC and how they're not being reflected and they're not given the opportunities to reach the highest level that they could. We've heard stories from the field, like specifically where Latina women and Filipino women working in the patient care industry, they're bypassed to get a promotion that they've been waiting for years, based on their sex, based on their ethnicity, but never based on their work ethic or based on their qualifications. It's always like somebody else came along and took it for them or took it from them. They're surpassed in their seniority, and they are just not given the chance to get the skills that they could be getting because they're allowed to, because of the ban on affirmative action. So yeah, Refilwe, you can go ahead. So why now? Why do we need Prop 16 now? So polling has been conducted over several years, and all of that has shown that in the summer of 2019, we were really on a path to victory in 2020. So after our campaign launched in early March, we set forth with ACA 5, which was an Assembly constitutional amendment that was presented by Assembly member Shirley Weber, who represents the district in San Diego. And so she brought this forth to the legislature. And with the impacts of COVID-19 and then the surge in protests due to the untimely death of George Floyd, we really were able to build like a strong coalition of organizations that really supported a more equitable California. Like the issues of racism, we could not avoid to see them any longer. The issues of structural racism came forth and were like right in our face, which made more people want to join this and be like, you know what, we need to do something about it. So Prop 16 was the perfect platform for all of their energies to come together, and this is where we're now. So the November 2020 electorate will be super vast, will be very diverse, and they're eager to vote. We've seen that behind us, there stands a strong coalition of young voters who have not been able to benefit from Prop 16. Like Refilwe and I were born after Prop 16 was banned, so we were not able to take advantage. But we're here to fight to make sure that these things return, and that is not only for ourselves, but it's for the generations to come. Cool. So again, like in California, we really believe that giving everybody an equal shot at success is super important. As we know, discrimination is real, racism is real, and people face this on a daily basis just based on where they come from. But it's really up to us to change that, and we think that through Prop 16, we're able to really take a step forth against discrimination and the systemic barriers that are going to really open the doors for women and people of color to continue to move forth. So by passing Prop 16, we believe that that we will continue to grow our California values and continue to build a stronger community for all of us, not just for the Black community or the Latino community, but for everybody who has ever been affected by discrimination and racism in their workplace, in their communities, in school, in every single level of our governance. Cool. Refilwe, you're muted.
As Maria mentioned, many people have come together around Prop 16 because of the impetus of the moment, because of the impetus of the last 20 years of moments, etc. And so we want to be able to let you all know how you can directly engage in this campaign. And so in a moment, because I'm sharing my full screen right now, I will share the link into our text bank sign up in the chat. And essentially it wouldn't sign you up for text banking immediately, it would sign you up for a text bank training where you would get to understand the platform, go over the message, and be able to know how to call folks, how to text people. Also as a heads up, it's not literally texting, it's like a desktop platform. So you don't have to worry about thousands of Californians having your phone number. And this is a really impactful way to be able to reach voters, especially in the virtual world that we're in now. So we'll definitely be sure to put that in the chat. Speaking of chat, You're hoping to engage you all in a little bit of discussion around this presentation. And so wanting to hear, we heard a few people before the presentation say that they were a little familiar with Prop 16 or affirmative action, Prop 209. So wanting to hear like folks who can recall maybe when Prop 209 was passed or what impact that had either in your life directly or in the California that we're in today. Oh, thanks, Maria.
That's true.
And I'll just jump in here to help moderate for the folks who are on the attendee side. You can raise your hand or click raise your hand to speak. If you're calling in from your cell phone, you can dial *9 and it'll put you in order to be able to speak. You all can also put your answers in the chat or ask any questions that you all would like to ask through our Q&A feature. I do recall Prop 209, and I'm going to age myself a little bit. So when Prop 209 was overturned, or well, we haven't overturned it yet, but when it went into effect, I was getting ready to go to college. So it definitely affected me personally and really laid the groundwork for what I would spend almost the next 10 years of my life working on, is ensuring that we had good retention of Black students across the UC system.
Thank you for sharing, Ndidi. Move the screen so that we'd all be able to see each other.
I guess I could talk about how I haven't benefited from something like an affirmative action program. So something that we hear a lot, like specifically now, like living in the proximity of like Silicon Valley, is like there's a lot of there's like a need actually to have more like STEM-based programs for young girls who just want to go into STEM. And as of right now, we are unable to have that because it would be like based on like what Prop 209 did to ban the affirmative action programs, we cannot create a pathways for young girls to go into STEM because they would have limitations, right? So with Prop 16, we would be able to build those programs that would be like, okay, well, there's this group of little girls who want to go into STEM, like let's start prepping them now. As the law stands right now, we can't do that. But with Prop 16, we would be able to do that. So it just came to mind because my sister wants to go into STEM. So I was like, oh, like we should get her into this program. And it's like, oh, like it doesn't really exist yet. So yeah, like I'm hopeful for the future. Like I really look forward to this propagating path so that we can have this not only for girls wanting to go into STEM, but like for Black and brown students who want to go to college and that need more support so that we can start building these programs out to really push them forward in the path that they need to be.
Yes, thank you. And so we have a question here from Baba Joe Brooks. Baba Joe, you can get on camera if you'd like and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your very content-rich presentation. I can remember when back in the day, because of my age, the passage of Proposition 209, and I can remember as well and have chronicled the disparities that have been expanded for Black and brown communities because of Proposition 209. Unless I missed it, you did not mention one of the African Americans, Ward Connolly, who was unfortunately the handkerchief head Negro who helped to pass Proposition 209 and even had the nerve to create what is referred to as a Civil Rights Institute, something like that, based on Proposition 209. Are there Ward Connolly opponents to this? Are they still around and alive? And what message should we be sending them besides showing up and voting for Proposition 16? Thank you.
Of course. So Ward Connerly is actually our main opposition right now. He's still at it. He's still trying to ban affirmative action. But we're very fortunate enough to have a lot of support from the UC. The UC Student Association has actually endorsed us. There's a bunch of organizations within UC who have supported us. So we're fighting back. Like, we're not stopping. We're not allowing it to happen again. Like we mentioned in our presentation, like, we've come a long way. This is the furthest that we've gone. So it's more than clear that there's a need for it. It's more than clear that there's a want for it. So I think we would be successful in defeating him.
I would suggest, if you haven't thought about it, creating a narrative about his backwardness and how his leadership has contributed to the disparities that Black and brown communities are now suffering from. You should check out what he's been saying, counter it with a narrative that can be encouraging for those who are on the fence or undecided about Proposition 16. That's my advice.
I appreciate it. We're gonna take it back to our little campaign office.
I was going to add to the conversation around opposition that in addition to Ward Connolly, there's also a pretty large opposition force targeting the Asian American community specifically. And so when it comes to like talking points or like how do we address these issues, it's important to remember that, you know, Asian American communities lack representation and leadership the way that other folks of color do. And that Prop 16 was something that would effectively benefit them as well. Additionally, an argument that is often used by the opposition is about like quotas, or that somehow that's going to hurt Asian American representation in K-12 education or higher education specifically. We have data that says otherwise. In addition to that, there's the idea of like, this is my personal talking point, right? The idea that we talk about solidarity often, or like if white people were like, oh, this is actually going to hurt us. So that's not the 16's campaign, but in terms of like community ways to discuss this issue is like, what does it really mean to be in solidarity with each other, and starting from that standpoint. But for folks who are a little bit more data minded and want to see like want the hard facts of it, well, we have hard fact details also as a part of the campaign that have actually shown that like it increases greater diversity all around for our communities when it comes to higher education. And the quota system has been like since 1976, I think, outlawed in America. So there's no such thing as a quota.
One more point about context that I think might be helpful. We're in this COVID-19 crisis, and the recovery, and it's not going to be a one-off. It's going to be, we're going to have another wave, I would predict. I hate to predict it, but it is not a one-off, and the recovery process is going to be connected to the advantages to a reversal of Proposition 209 could bring. We have to be in a position to prepare ourselves to contribute to community building and a recovery process, and passing Proposition 16 would contribute to that capacity to be present in community, to build community. We're going to be dealing with the recovery process for some time, and we need to have the capacity to be able to contribute.
Absolutely. I think, as we've all seen, like, our communities of color have been the ones that have been most impacted by COVID-19. It's been like the businesses, specifically by the Asian American businesses, were targeted like very early on by racism and like the xenophobia that came from COVID-19 and the virus itself. So I think with Prop 16, like, it would really give cities the ability to be able to say, like, we're gonna put this money aside specifically to help these communities, because otherwise they can't do that because of the current ban on these types of programs. But really, I think, I really appreciate what you said, because I think it's a huge point that we've been bringing up. We've been focusing on really like uplifting the communities, but we are living through a global pandemic. So it's really important for us to really highlight that too. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you. I'll shut up.
No, please continue. We love talking.
I don't know if other folks either had questions or narratives related to the impact of either 209 or what could be the impact of Prop 16.
Yes, and I wanted to just talk a little bit and quantify for us what this looks like in higher education. Is just that Black folks are really hit the most hardest, as well as the indigenous populations in terms of representation. And so across the UC system, there is only one campus that is above 10% in terms of Black student population. And there's also very few campuses across the UC system that are over 3% in Indigenous population. And so for the folks who are students and Black students at these UC schools, what that pencils out to is that I went to UC Davis and there was 33,000 students there and there was 865 Black students. And we could list their names, we knew them. And so it was a very, very small percentage of the population being represented. And thus our, you know, our matriculation and our retention in the system, the deck was kind of stacked against us. And so overturning something like Proposition 209 would be monumental, especially coupled with some of the COVID-19 regulations that have been like more lenient. And so the UC system recently stopped using the ACT and the SAT as a gatekeeping measure for their school admissions. And so this is a great opportunity for us as Black folks, as Black Indigenous people of color, to really get our foot in the door of higher education in a way that we haven't had this opportunity in a very long time. So I'm really happy to see Proposition 16 doing so well. Everybody please vote yes on it so we can overturn this and be able to really just enjoy what's our right. You know, the University of California was set up so that we would have a public higher learning institution and research-based institutions. And I believe that, you know, every BIPOC student deserves that.
Absolutely.
We'll give the participants some time to get comfortable and ask some questions. But one of the questions I do have about this is, I'm wondering, what would this look like? What can you paint the picture of the world after we pass Proposition 16?
I think I would initially warn that this isn't going to solve many of the structural concerns that we have today, right? It's not like if Prop 16 happened, we wouldn't have had the situation we had in Minneapolis, LA, Oakland, every city in America at this point, right? And so I think I want to start there, in that we recognize that there are greater structural injustices to be addressed, and that this bill won't necessarily catch all. But going back to my example of what it was like to navigate the university space as a Black student, where I think probably affirmative action would have impacted me most, I think I would have seen more Black members. I'm in a labor union now and doing labor work, right? I could have gotten a lot more involved a lot earlier. When I did get involved as a student, it was in like my third year, when I finally saw another Black worker and they met me and they were telling me about their contract fight and what they were going through. And that was my introduction to the union. I knew nothing about the labor movement and unions before getting to talk to Black workers on my campus, and an AFSCME intern at that time, actually. So through AFSCME specifically and our members in the fight that our union has taken on of not only, you know, bargaining for wages and benefits, but bargaining for the common good, bargaining around these issues that affect our communities broadly. So I would have seen more Black workers, and that would have been a very big difference to me at UC San Diego, where less than 2% of the campus population were Black students, right? So then that takes me to my second point of I would have seen more Black students. I'm grateful that the UC that I went to had a history of Black student organizing that allowed for me to walk into a campus space that had a Black resource center. That eventually, by the time I graduated, had Black housing being developed and a floor that we were having established and worked on. And so Black student organizing got us very far, that I could only imagine how many more classes we all would have been able to attend if we didn't have to do that fighting. And we had Prop 16 to do the fighting for us, because the director of the center or the people supposed to be working on our access and retention would have had the tools to do that work. And it didn't require for us to mobilize. It didn't require for us to spend time outside of classes and other extracurriculars. I was 15 minutes away from the beach. I went like 2-3 times in 4 years, y'all, because this is the work that we're required to do. And that's what our higher education experience looks like.
Yeah, I agree with everything Refilwe said. I think we have to, well, I'm very optimistic, but I take it cautiously. So I think the way that I see it is that this is like a first step towards leveling the playing field for everybody. As of right now, like our members, like we mentioned, are getting bypassed for promotions that they deserve, that they're qualified for. So I think that this is really gonna bring like a lot of, or it's gonna allow people to have an opportunity to get to a better place financially, because they're gonna be able to get promotions, they're gonna be able to take positions of leadership. And not only that, but I think specifically within our membership, because I'm just thinking about it from an organizing standpoint, it's that our members are gonna have a better time when they're at work, because they're gonna be, their leaders are gonna be people that look like them. Right now, like all their managers and supervisors are white people who are constantly harassing them, who are constantly discriminating them. And once they have the opportunity to really be taken into consideration to take take those spaces, it's like, well, they came from the same place, so they're gonna have at least that common decency to treat people with respect, which they don't have right now. But yeah, so I'm taking it with like, I'm very cautious and being optimistic, but I'm really excited for what is possible once we repeal the ban on affirmative action. I think that it's better to have something and not need it than to need it and not have it. So I think like with Prop 16, that's what it is. Like, it's better to have it and work through things, because there's a lot of issues in the world that we can't fix, but this is the first step. This is the first step at it. So yeah, I agree with everything Refilwe said. I think Joe had one more comment that he wants to share with us.
Yes, I do. I'm an old guy and a graduate of UC Berkeley's Graduate School of City Planning, and a part of the inaugural faculty of Black Studies, which was a result of the student strike, as you might remember. And I can remember students of color who benefited from the strike as a pathway to increasing opportunity for us to serve community and beyond. And I'm just thinking about how reversing 209 will allow students to return to the UC system and get the kind of opportunities that we fought for in the late 60s and 70s through the establishment of Black studies, Latino studies, Asian American studies, and on and on. So I think the fight is worth fighting for to pass Proposition 16. It has a historical context and a legacy that needs to be continued. Thank you for your effort and your struggle.
Thank you for all of your work. I mean, I was talking about all of that. I was able to benefit from Black student organizing on my own campus. And so I think the work of folks like you is the work that we're then able to build off on.
Yes, some of us were gassed and went to jail trying to make that happen. Ronald Reagan. Ah.
All right. Do we have any more questions or comments from our audience, from our attendees? And so I'll give folks a few moments to drop a question in the chat or raise their hands. So Dejan Grace is asking, what does it mean for Proposition 16 to be on the ballot with everything that's going on in the world right now?
I have to excuse the background noise, but I think that when Maria was going over one of the slides, or in the beginning, we were talking about how we ended up here today. mentioned the energy around George Floyd. And I think with everything that's going on today, folks should be reflective, I think, of just how much it takes in order for something like this to pass, right? In 20 years, this is the most energy that we've had to repeal, not even like to repeal the ban on affirmative action, right? It's 20 years, and it took a pandemic, a global pandemic. It took like the viralized, sensationalized murder of Black people. And then it took all of the folks who in those last 20 years had been doing the organizing work and to be able to make this happen. And so I think that's what that question raises to me, is just all that it took to get to this point. But then also, because we're in this moment, I would like to think that that is why we're going to be a successful campaign, that folks who maybe would have been in the middle 10, 15 years ago, who were misdirected, can really think about the kind of society that we're in and the change that they want to make.
I agree. And I think that this November on the ballot, we're accompanied by really amazing legislation. We're on the ballot with Prop 15, who puts schools and communities first, which is another amazing proposition that actually, when paired together with Prop 16, does a lot of amazing things for our communities. Like Prop 16 actually is really helpful in helping the expenditure of the money that Prop 15 will collect. So Prop 15, just quick FYI, is going to collect a few $1 billion. I think it's around like $12 billion in taxes every year that is meant to go back to local communities and schools. And with Prop 16's passage, like Prop 15 would be able to better designate that money to the communities that need it. I think on the ballot is also Prop 17, which, if I'm not mistaken, has to do with restoring voting rights to parolees or something like that, which is amazing. It's another piece of legislation that is going to impact our communities. There's also Prop 22, which we should vote no on, which basically is something that is meant to suppress the rights of workers, is in misclassifying workers as like independent contractors for Uber and Lyft or whatever, like driving based app. But so I think like we're in a very special moment where it's like you can't miss the structural racism that exists in our society right now. So I think like these things being on the ballot right now are things that I never imagined that would have to be on, but are on, and so we should take advantage of the like opportunity that we have to really vote on this. Like this is our opportunity to vote for our futures. Like our future was decided like 20 years ago, but this is the opportunity that we have to change it or to work to change it. Like I mentioned, like I think that this is really like a stepping stone. This is like a first stab at like really dismantling like the systems that exist today, but it's given us the opportunity to do that. Like there's been several times where Prop 209 has been, or there's been attempts to repeal it, and it's never gone forth. And I think that because of, like Refilwe said, the viral sensation that are going on right now, like we're in a very special moment. So I think we should really take advantage of it. We should continue to push forward, and I really think that we can bring some change to our communities.
Yes, thank you, Refilwe and Maria, for providing this brief teach-in for us. It has been phenomenal, and I just, really wanted to create a space where folks could be able to engage quickly with what's on the ballot, and so that there's no surprises when it's time for us to cast our votes, and that we have a good sense of what changes are going to be coming in the way that, we experience certain institutions. So I really want to thank you all for being a part of this today. Is there a way that we can get in contact with you all? Could you put the slide with the contact information back up for us? And so I'll stop sharing.
Yes, I will do that. And then I'll also put my email address in the chat. So as mentioned, external organizer with AFSCME Local 3299, and we're interested in building better community partnerships and relationships and knowing who are around. And so wherever there's a UC campus, that's where we're at. So we're throughout the entire state of California, Bay Area to SoCal. I'm specifically the NorCal external organizer, but can connect with folks in the South with my partner there. And so if there's ever something that y'all would like to tap in with labor for, we have a racial justice committee that I staff that's really been trying to better develop all of our local folks. And so shameless plug, that'll also be in the chat, but I will share my screen.
I also shared my email in the chat. If yeah, there's anything that you all ever need, like Refilwe said, we have different committees that support our communities. We have an immigration committee, we have a political action committee, the racial justice committee. We have a recently developed AAPI committee. So we're really making an effort into really uplifting the communities within our membership. So we would love to connect with any of you who are willing to work with us. We would love to have you if you want to come and present for us and how we can be of service to you. That would be amazing. But yeah, feel free to contact us. Just shoot us an email or whatever is best for you. But yeah, thank you for the space and for allowing us to be here today.
Awesome, thank you. And so they have dropped their info in the chat. I'm gonna bring my screen back up while we prepare for our next session. And so our next session is going to be our teaching on Proposition 20. It's gonna be led by Yoel Haile. This is a person who's very near and dear to my heart and who has been there for some of these organizing struggles together. And so I am excited to hear about this. We were working together around some private prison divestment. And so without further ado, I will give you Brother Yoel, who's going to teach us about no on Proposition 20. Yoel? I'm gonna unmute you, brother. Okay, you good.
Can y'all hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
I didn't realize I was muted. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yoel. I am, open this a little bit. My name is Yoel. I wanted to present today on Proposition 20, walk us through what it is, what it isn't, what it will do, and then the analysis of it that we have. So I will start with initially, what it is, just reading what the ballot measure name and the title and summary is, and then go into some of the context and the history that has led to this particular moment, and then what the analysis of it is and why we have arrived at a position of no on Proposition 20. So Proposition 20, otherwise we're naming it the prison spending ballot measure to maintain mass incarceration and white supremacy. If you go to ballotpedia.com, you will get the title and summary that's approved by the AG's office. And what they're naming it is Criminal Sentencing, Parole, and DNA Collection Initiative. The summary, which is what it will essentially do, is that it will limit access to parole programs established for nonviolent offenders who have completed a full term of their primary offense by eliminating eligibility for certain offenses. What that really means is that it will exclude people who would otherwise be eligible to earn points by participating in educational and rehabilitative programs in state prison, so that they could go before the parole board. We'll change standards and requirements governing parole decision under this program. So we'll also make some changes to the way parole decisions are made. It's going to authorize felony charges for specified theft crimes currently chargeable only as misdemeanors, including some theft crimes where the value is between $250 and $950. So before, Proposition 47, which I'll talk about later, if there was a theft and the amount was under $450, it would be a misdemeanor, right? That was the law before Proposition 47. In 2014, Proposition 47 came, and it increased that dollar amount from $450 to $950. So it made it so that if there was a theft that involved up to $950 of value, it would be charged as a misdemeanor, as opposed to being, as opposed to it being charged as a felony, which has far more consequences to an individual's life. And what this Proposition 20 is seeking to do is, not only is it going back to the 450 it was before Prop 47, but it also wants to lower that amount to 250, and essentially really criminalize petty theft by charging it as a felony, and obviously have all the consequences of a felony conviction, visit an individual who may be caught up in this. And then the last piece is it requires people convicted of specified misdemeanors, which are very low-level offenses, to submit to the collection of DNA samples in the state database, which is a huge breach of privacy by a government entity. So these are the kind of core things that Proposition is seeking to do. The Proposition 20 is seeking to do. In terms of what the fiscal impact statement is from the LAO, the Legislative Analyst's Office, is that it is projected to increase state and local correctional costs, so like, prison costs, in the tens of millions of dollars every year, at a time when there's significant budget shortfall and when all available resources should be going to COVID relief, rent relief, universal health care, universal child care, all the things that all human beings need. It's also projected to increase state and local court-related costs that more than several $1 million annually. It's also projected to increase state and local law enforcement costs, that money that will be spent in collecting and processing DNA samples in the few millions of dollars. So there's no exact amount, but what's clear is that's going to be tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars every year that will be spent if this proposition passes. So let's go back to the context that brought us the moment that we're in today. And the context is really mass incarceration and white supremacy. So as you can see in the graph here, the U.S. had about 300,000 people incarcerated in the 1970s when Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs, otherwise known as the war on Black people. And there are recordings of senior advisors to Nixon that said, we couldn't criminalize Blackness anymore like we used to do in the 60s and 40s and 50s, just outright. And we couldn't also criminalize being anti the war in Vietnam, so we had to invent the war on drugs as a way to criminalize en masse and incarcerate en masse Black people and anti-war protesters, the Vietnam War protesters in the 70s. So as a result of these policies, then Reagan comes to power, then Clinton comes to power. And in the succession of those years, since early 1970s through the 1990s, you have a series of laws and policies that were put in place that have led this country from having about 300,000 people incarcerated in the early 70s to 2.2 million people incarcerated in the present day. So this is the nationwide trend on the left, and on the right, what you see is the trend that happened in California from the 1970s, and you see the same trend you see nationally, which is that just like America led the mass incarceration phenomena, California was really one of the biggest incarcerator states in the country. In terms of what this meant for Black people and other people of color, the disparity, if you look at the picture on the right side, what it's showing you is the number of incarcerated people per 100,000 in that population. So for every 100,000 Black people, there were 3,036 Black people incarcerated. For white people, it was 453 people. For Latinos, Latinx people, 757. and for American Indian and other Alaska Natives, it was 996. So what you see here is a significant disparity between the races about who is incarcerated and who is affected by mass incarceration. On the left side, what you will see is that in California, Black people make up about 6% of the state population, but we make up about 27% of the people who are incarcerated. Latinos make up 38%, but make of the state population and make up 41% of the incarcerated population. On the other hand, white people make up 40% of the state population and only 26% of the prison population. And what this shows you is that the criminal legal system systematically has targeted Black people and other people of color to really be the people who fill up this prisons throughout the state. Another figure that we also talked about in the higher education organizing spaces is that the state has built only one university in the last 30 years, the University of California, Merced, but built 22 prisons in that time. And the people who are filling those prisons are Black people and other people of color. And what this, mass incarceration trend led to in 2009 is what you see in the picture, which is horrible and unconstitutional prison overcrowding. This was, I think, at Waco State Prison, if I'm not mistaken, where people were sleeping 3 people to a bunk bed. There was egregious human rights violations. There was, absolutely inadequate and horrendous healthcare services for incarcerated people, and was a huge outrage. And, the Supreme Court ultimately ruled that this was cruel and unusual punishment for incarcerated people and ordered the state to reduce the number of people in prisons by about 33,000 people. The California prisons were designed to only house about 80,000 people, and at their peak, they were housing about 160,000 people. So in 2009, in terms of the budget implications of mass incarceration and this particular set of circumstances, in 2009, California taxpayers spent about 11% of the state budget, which is about $8 billion, to house about 160,000 people incarcerated in 33 state prisons that are only designed to hold 8,000 people. As I said, the situation was so horrific that the Supreme Court ruled the overcrowding violated the U.S. Constitution and ordered the state to reduce its prison population by 33,000 people within 2 years. This was in 2009. Now in 2020, California spent about 7.4% of its budget to house about 105,000 people. Governor Newsom just last month ordered the release of 8,000 people because of coronavirus, which is absolutely inadequate. And all healthcare professionals have recommended a 50% reduction of incarcerated people in order to really mitigate the COVID outbreak that's happening in the state prisons, including San Quentin and other prisons throughout the state. So how did we get from 2009 to 2020? What were some of the changes that happened in the laws that allowed for a reduction of the number of people incarcerated in state prison? So in terms of how we got, from where we were in 2009, where the Supreme Court ordered the governor to reduce the number of people incarcerated to the present moment, there were a couple of significant laws that passed. So in 2011, AB 109 passed in order to be able to meet the mandate from the Supreme Court. And what AB 109 did is it shifted, people who were convicted of non-serious, non-violent, and non-sexual crimes, as defined in the state law. Those people were taken from state prisons and were now being jailed in the local jails. That reduced the number of people in the state prisons, but it did also increase the number of people in the local jails. Proposition 47 then passed by the voters in 2014, and what Prop 47 did was it changed several property and petty theft offenses, petty crimes, and drug crimes that were before, charged as felonies into misdemeanors. So a lot of non-serious, non-violent felonies or wobblers, and wobblers are crimes that can be charged as a misdemeanor or as a felony. It's completely up to the discretion of the prosecutor or the district attorney. All of those things became misdemeanors. And so for example, theft, the threshold for theft that could be charged as a felony now became $950 instead of $450. And then Proposition 57 in 2016 increased parole chances for people convicted of nonviolent crimes, and gave them more opportunities to earn sentence reduction credits for good behavior, for participating in educational programs, for participating in rehabilitative programs. So what was the level of public support for these reforms? So Proposition 47, when it passed in 2014, 59.6 or nearly 60% of the state voters voted in support of it. Only 2 out of the 58 district attorneys at that time supported it, even though most counties passed it. And then in 2016, when Proposition 57 passed, it passed by 64.5% of the voters. And what this shows is that California voters are now significantly shifting from the punitive, lock them up and throw the book mentality that existed, in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 2000s to now to a more of rehabilitative and reformist approaches. So what is the fiscal impact of Proposition 47? So Proposition 47 has been, producing significant savings for the state. In the first year that it was put in place, it saved the state about $39 million. And then it has been steadily increasing to where in this fiscal year, it's estimated to save the state $122 million. And these cost savings are then reallocated into, as you can see on the graph on the right, to mental health and substance abuse and diversion programs. About 65% of the cost savings goes to that. About 10% goes to trauma recovery programs, and the remaining goes to K-12 school programs for at-risk students. So really the cost savings, the money that's being saved from reduced incarceration is being put into education, trauma recovery, and substance abuse, mental health, all the things that actually prevent crime from happening and that actually provide human and social services to people who need them. For Proposition 57, it's expected to reduce the population of incarcerated people by 2,600 people in the 2017-18 fiscal year, with a net cost savings of $40 million. In the long term, and by 2021, the annual savings are projected to be at $180 million. So these are the kind of, money that's being saved from the billions that was being spent in incarceration that can now be spent in rehabilitation, housing, education, and other social mental health services and other social services that can prevent crime from happening in the first place, but can also, meet people's immediate material needs. So, what is Proposition 20 and who's really supporting it, right? And if you go to the Yes on 20 website, this is literally what you see. It says, support the police, yes on Prop 20. California politicians have taken away the tools for police to hold criminals accountable and enforce law and order, and it's time to restore that power. So Proposition 20 is really a law enforcement, and district attorneys and, police ballot measure. They keep saying politicians took away their power, but it's really the voters who implemented these reforms. And I cannot think of a more tone-deaf even flyer or website like this one, when at a time when the entire country is rallying against police brutality, police violence, police murder, that they're still trying to look for policies and changes in laws that would incarcerate more people, that would cost the state more money, that don't solve any of the underlying issues that lead people to be involved in any of these offenses. And really, they're doing this because it's the only way for them to stay in business. It's the only way police can keep taking the kind of budget out of the cities that they're taking. It's the only way that the prison guards can remain in business, because if there's no people in prisons, then there would be no need for prison guards. And if there are no people to prosecute, the DA's offices won't really exist in the way that they exist now. So when you really think about it, the people who support, Proposition 20, who are advancing, are the district attorneys, the police, the sheriffs, the prison guards. These are all people who stand to benefit from mass incarceration, and mass incarceration is really, a white supremacy cloaked and covered, in the veneer of the law and all of that. So, all of that to say, this is really a ballot measure that's pushed by law enforcement. It doesn't have the best interest of the public. Certainly doesn't have the best interest of Black people and people of color. And this is what it says on their website. If you look at who opposes Proposition 20, you will look at the California Chief Probation Officers Union, the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, National Center for Victims of Crime, the California Democratic Party, the ACLU of California, public safety leaders, Governor Jerry Brown, a whole host of people who actually are working to serve the people of the state and the marginalized communities that they serve. That's who supports, who opposes Proposition 20, and the only people who support Proposition 20 are cops and DAs. So I'll stop there to see if there are any questions, but this is my short presentation on Proposition 20.
Thank you, Yoel. I wanted to read something here from the Yes on Prop 20 website. It says that the two pieces here that are key to here is that this initiative would also require a parole board to consider an inmate's entire criminal history when considering their release. Their second point is that Prop 20 would require persons convicted of certain misdemeanors that were classified as wobblers or felonies before 2014, such as shoplifting, grand theft, drug possession, also with other several crimes, including domestic violence, prostitution, to submit to the collection of DNA samples for state and federal databases. And so this really, to me, shows a broadening of police power and legal powers to really literally enslave and incarcerate BIPOC folks. And so I'm wondering, what can we do to stop this?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is, everybody's getting bombarded, being asked to vote for the presidential election, but what's really most important is, voting down ballot, because these Proposition 20, along with all the other propositions we've heard about, we just heard about and we will hear later, these are all going to be down ballot measures, right? So, the first thing is we have to vote no on it. The second thing is we have to make sure we tell all our folks, all our people to vote no on it. As you saw, there isn't a wide support for this other than in the law enforcement, circle. But all the advocates, everybody's united in wanting to defeat this, including the governor, who just donated $1 million, as I understand, yesterday to the No on 20 campaign. So I think it's really just making sure that we educate our folks to vote no on Proposition 20, because most people won't go down that low on the ballot to vote for anything down ballot. And I think that's the most important thing, that we vote no on it. We tell everybody we know to vote no on it, and go to the website for No on 20 and seek opportunities to volunteer. But I think those two would be the most important thing, I would say.
Thank you. Baba Joe.
Yes. Thank you, brother. That was a very content-rich and educational process for me. I was not aware, as I should be, of the damage that this Proposition 20 could bring. This is my question, and it's really the context of the COVID-19 crisis. That's not going to be a one-off. The fool in the White House and his propaganda and building up the fear of people, really, and which can be also a rallying call for police and more police. I'm just trying to think of the kind of narrative that we need to be promoting to oppose Proposition 20, where we can all see more of us winning in the context of the recovery process and the crisis that we're facing with the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, thank you, Baba Joe. That's an important question. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is just how wasteful this proposition is, right? Proposition both 47 and 57 have saved this state hundreds of millions of dollars, and those savings will continue to grow over time. And especially right now when, you know, every level of government is expecting a significant reduction in revenue, which usually means services cut that serve us more than anybody else. That what Proposition 20 does is it will, all those cost savings would disappear, and we'll probably get more costs incurred to the state. And what that will materially mean is that there won't be any rehabilitative programs inside prisons. There won't be money that's spent on education, K through 12, on mental health services, on substance use services. And on top of that, right now, we're dealing with, you know, what will be a crisis of like homelessness. I mean, we're already dealing with a serious homelessness issue, but right now with COVID, we're dealing with a lot of people without any rent relief or mortgage relief are going to be evicted. There is really no other, if we haven't been paying rent, it's not like we're getting relief. It's just getting added up to the debt that we're gonna owe. And if we can't pay it, as most people can't, because a lot of people have been out of work, there is no recourse. And at a time when every cost saving, every resource of the state should be directed into providing rent and mortgage relief, into providing universal basic income, providing, like, you know, education, medicine, all of those things, adding extra expenses to the state is literally the most irresponsible thing that can happen. And the only people who are doing that are the only people who will benefit from us being incarcerated.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions or comments from our participants? This proposition in particular for me is one of those places where we really have to come out strong with that no, because especially when we have uprisings and protests against police brutality, and particularly given COVID-19, we have to do whatever we can to ensure that we don't have more people entering this system in the midst of a pandemic. It's inhumane and grossly inhumane to overcrowd correctional facilities during a pandemic, and then to ground it in passing policies such as Prop 20 that would greatly increase those numbers. And to me, it almost rings like human rights, serious human rights violations, and almost genocide. Because when you are pushing a population into what we are seeing with COVID-19, which is almost, which is a very painful death from COVID-19, it's to me, it reads genocide. And so coming out strong against Proposition 20 is really important. Do we have any more questions from our attendees? And I'll give y'all a couple moments to manage the tech. And Yoel, I really appreciate you breaking down the cost savings for us and what this means just budget-wise, because we're in this COVID-19 crisis where everything is just a shakeup. Our budgets and our economy is really suffering. And so cost savings is a really important conversation we need to be having around propositions and around our policies. Any more comments?
I mean, I know this is about Prop 20, but I would also say, you know, every public health official has said that the number of people in prison should be cut by half in order to mitigate 50, and the governor has been like shamefully refusing to act on that. And we've seen a lot of people die in the prisons, a lot of people get infected. There's just no way you can actually implement CDC's guidelines to prevent COVID in a carceral system. And the other thing I would suggest is that we pressure the governor to really release as many people as possible, really 50%, if not more. You know, I just found out the other day that about 1/3 of the people in prisons have only 2 years left on their sentence. And when we're refusing to release those people, we're really turning what is, you know, a 2-year incarceration sentence into a potential death sentence because of our refusal to release people. There's a lot of elders, people who are over the age of 60, who pose very little, if at all, safety risk if they come home and are reunited with their families. And there's just a lot of categories of people who should really be released, who are incarcerated, who the governor is refusing to release. And so on top of, I think, you know, supporting, you know, voting no on this ballot measure, that, you know, we should, you know, put relentless pressure on the governor to really act and, you know, empty the prisons.
You know, on that, I must say, can you hear me?
Yes.
I must say, you're so right. Another constituency is our own community members who would welcome home people who are incarcerated. A part of the problem that we might have in convincing the governor to go further is to hear the voice of people who would welcome them back and provide them with shelter and opportunity.
Absolutely, Baba Joe. We have to consider that, you know, for every person that's incarcerated, there's a family around them, there's loved ones around them. And sometimes we forget about that, and we forget about how much incarceration impacts everyone else who's connected to the actual person incarcerated, and what that looks like, having that person be away. And so that's really important. Yoel, I have a question for you though. Can you kind of explain what types of powers this would give prosecutors and DAs in terms of like discretion?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things they're trying to do is, for instance, lower the threshold for petty theft from where it is right now, 950 to 250. And those offenses would become felonies or wobblers. And for instance, if they become wobblers, what that means is the DA gets to decide whether it's charged as a misdemeanor or it's felony. There's no check. There's really no quality control. If the DA looks at you and likes you and wants to charge you as a misdemeanor, they'll do that. Or if you're white, they will do that. If they look at you, you're black, and they want to charge you as a felony, they'll do that. So it's significant. You know, they already have significant power in terms of charging decisions. And this only increases that power. And, you know, structurally, part of, you know, ending mass incarceration, the conversation has to be around absolutely curbing and cutting the discretion that district attorneys and prosecutors have, and lowering the sentencing that they can seek for offenses. And so, you know, I think, you know, this obviously expands their power. It expands the power of the police to do arrests. It expands the power of the prosecutors to seek harsher sentences, harsher than they already are, which led us to mass incarceration. So it's really just restoring the powers to them, where they exercise their discretion to lead us to mass incarceration. And it's just, and you know, the last 9-10 years of reforms, it's trying to undo that so we can go back to the crisis we were in before this.
Yes, and I have a follow-up to that, because I know you know this. What is kind of the leanings of our DAs or the DAs in the counties that you're serving right now?
So generally, with the exception of the San Francisco and the Contra Costa district attorney offices, I mean, let me just say they vary. Most DA offices are, you know, they tend to be very much law and order, old school, you know, prosecute them to death type of prosecutors. I mean, you hear all kinds of horror stories that come from, you know, like about what DAs do. You know, just to give you an example, so right now we're in the middle of, you know, we've been doing analysis of prosecution patterns, and I'll just give you Alameda County, for instance. The data from 2017 and 2018 shows that more than 60% of the cases that were prosecuted in the Alameda County DA's office were low-level offenses. The same with Sacramento County, that less than 10% of the charges that they've brought are actually for serious and violent felonies. And, you know, that completely undoes the narrative they try to push, which is, you know, all day they're just out there prosecuting, you know, murderers and rapists and all kinds of violent criminals. And when you look at the data, what it shows you is that all day they're actually prosecuting petty theft, people who are struggling with mental health issues, people who are struggling with poverty, people who are struggling with substance use disorder, and people who have made mistakes. And the significant portion of their staff capacity and their budget is actually spent prosecuting and criminalizing poor people endlessly. And so, you know, I think that just like we're talking about defunding the police departments throughout the state, throughout the country, we really should also be having a conversation about defunding the DA's offices, because, you know, police can arrest you all they want, but if the DA doesn't prosecute you, that case goes nowhere. And they're really just, you know, one can't function without the other. And, you know, the police departments have gotten, you know, rightfully a lot of scrutiny. The people who've always avoided scrutiny are the prosecutors, who really do, you know, who take it like, you know, longer and put the person away, refuse to let people come home from incarceration by opposing their parole hearings, seeking enhancements to get longer sentences. You know, just, we did a court watch a couple months ago in Alameda County, and there was a DA, Bill Baselli, who was asking for extra couple of jail time for somebody who stole $20 worth of wet wipes during COVID, right? And this is what they're doing every day. And, you know, that DA gets paid over $200,000. And all he's doing is seeking more jail time for somebody who stole $20 worth of wet wipes. So if we just eliminate his job and take those $200,000 savings, right, we can probably pay 3 or 4 people who are in the same predicament their entire year's rent and give them all the support they need to actually get a job and be employed with one DA salary, who's only seeking more jail time for stealing $20 worth of wet wipes. And I think we have to really think about it in those terms.
Yes, and something that comes up for me is just having to think of, like, you know, getting a petty theft charge and then having to submit DNA to the state as part of, you know, your sentence, or keeping DNA on record is extremely problematic to me, especially considering how small and how easy it is as a person of color to be criminalized. And even it's just, you know, once your DNA is in the system, they're able to test it up against, you know, any sample that they believe could be yours. And so for me, it's it just opens up such a wide can of worms. And I'm seeing all of these things converge on top of each other. I'm seeing, you know, mass incarceration, the increased criminalization, and the changes in these policies that are happening, as well as like folks, the system really trying to get our DNA, the issues that we're having right now with surveillance, and the issues that we're having with these predictors of crime in a certain area. All of this is converging in my head. Like, we have serious issues. I think that voting no on Proposition 20 is like a first step. And this is just like, to me, this is us putting our foot down about what we're going to take in terms of policy, and then what we're going to, you know, just let fly in terms of policy. And this is something that we just can't. And this is a narrative that we just can't feed into, and thinking that, you know, there's criminals everywhere, because that's really not what it is. And so I hope that folks vote no on Proposition 20. If there are no other comments, I'd love to thank you, Yoel. Thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you for giving us this rundown of just what's happening in our county and what you're seeing in our county when it comes to court watch and how we should vote no on this. Thank you.
And you should call Nancy O'Malley and tell her to come out publicly and oppose Proposition 20.
Yes, please, please. These DAs have so much discretion. What's coming up for me is just that I had a colleague and a friend from back in college who, you know, they did some petty theft and they were slapped with 99 years in prison by the DA. And it was the DA who really sought those charges in that sentence. So imagine stealing a laptop and getting 99 years for doing so. So thank you. Okay, so before our next session, we have a small break. I want to give folks a moment to breathe and just a moment to kind of, if you need to manage your tech, we will break until 3:45, and then folks can come back in and we will get ready for our Know Your Voting Rights session with Allyssa Victory. I'm personally very excited. I got some of my information from the Registrar of Voters in the mail, and I do not know what to do with it. And so Allyssa is going to walk us through some of that and some of our rights and just things to watch out for as we do our mail-in ballots this November. So we're going to go on break for some time. And so I'll get some music going for you all. All right, so we'll get back into things. I just wanted to give folks some time if they needed to take a bio break, manage their tech, or just take a breath after we've laid so much information on you all. Our next session is going to be our Know Your Voting Rights training with Allyssa Victory, also a dear friend and one of my sisters in arms, and just an overall powerhouse when it comes to all things politics. She does these very awesome Know Your Rights trainings. And so Allyssa.
Thank you for that introduction, Queen. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to Queen Ndidi for reaching out to me about this great event, and for all the organizations that made this happen, and to everybody who's attending with us to learn and hopefully spread some information so that we're all educated and empowered to vote this November. I'm going to present a lot of kind of technical information about what your rights are, what timelines, what it means to register to vote, who can register, and what it's looking like in terms of how we're going to be able to either cast our votes at the polls or return our mail-in ballots. I do want it to be open and flowing, so if there's questions or comments, feel free to put them into the chat, and I hope that there'll be a little bit of time at the end for us to have that open discussion. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. It says I'm disabled.
See. So Davina, as our tech support, can you elevate Allyssa to our co-host?
I just did. Allyssa should be a co-host right now.
All right. Are y'all seeing the PowerPoint up on the screen? Yes? Okay, perfect. Let me see if I can move it over a bit too. Okay. So again, this is about Know Your Rights, specific about voting in this November's election. a lot of the information is going to be specific to our county, since that's where our organizations are and the people that we serve. Again, I am Allyssa Victory. I am a civil rights and labor attorney. I'm also based in Oakland, born and raised here, and I'm the NorCal Community Programs Director for the Afrikan Black Coalition. Shout out to my comrades and to other folks from our community who have presented previously in this forum. And so I'll leave my information at the end, and I'm happy to share this PowerPoint, so you don't have to feel like you got to write down everything. So I already introduced myself. If y'all could drop in the chat, or even the panelists who want to come off the mic to say if any of y'all have registered to vote or verified your voter registration in the last 30 days. Last 30 days. Didi, thumbs up, yes or no? Okay.
Yes, got my stuff in the mail yesterday.
Okay. So we'll come back to why that's important, to always check your registration status, even if you believe you've been registered or are always registered every year. A little overview of, again, some of the things I'm going to try to touch on is who is allowed to vote, how to register to vote, how to submit your ballot, some key deadlines for this November's election, and then some resources so you can follow up. So a lot of the information may be slightly different based on what specific city within the county you're in. And so it's, you may have to do some follow up to find out specific information for what's going to be on your ballot. I do have to note that voter suppression kind of clouds everything that we're going to be discussing today. There's photos that we've posted from different civil rights movements across different eras, decades, generations. Some of the photos are from this year, from different states who had enormous lines of folks who were voting and had to wait, hours, the entire day, who had to wait in scorching temperatures, who had to wait, with nowhere to sit, with no type of relief. People who were barred and had to try to file court orders last minute to be able to stay at the polls and to keep them open. So this is already the landscape that has been in American voting, and certainly has not gone away. And we're seeing that still today. And it's really exacerbated by COVID and a lot of the shifts that are required to ensure people are healthy and safe, including our poll workers. So I want us to be open and clear that that is real and that exists even in Alameda County, even in California. The voter statistics from the March 2020 elections that happened in our county, there was around 900,000 people who had registered out of the 1.6 million residents that we have in Alameda County, but only around 50% of those folks came out to actually vote and cast a ballot. So there's still a big gap between even folks who register and then making it out to the polls. And as you can see from some of these photos and demonstrations, there's a lot of reasons why people are not able and are barred systematically from getting to the polls. So I'm so happy that y'all are including voters' rights and information in today's summit. Some technicalities on who's allowed to vote. You must be 18 years of age and 18 by November 3rd. So if your birthday is on November 3rd or any time between now and then, you are allowed to register to vote and will be allowed to cast a ballot on the November election. You must be a U.S. citizen. Only citizens are allowed to vote, and you need to be a resident of this state. So if you live in a different state or if you spend most of your time there and are only visiting California, you're not going to be allowed to register here. You are allowed to register to vote if you are incarcerated inside of county jails. County jails are distinct from state or federal prisons, but we have a jail system here in our own county, and a lot of people do not know that they're allowed to register to vote and to get a ballot and cast their ballot even while they're inside of jail. So those include people who are serving time for misdemeanors, who are serving time as a condition of probation, again in county jails, who are serving a felony sentence in the county jail, and those who are being held pre-trial, meaning they have not had their trial yet, so they're not convicted of anything. It also includes people who are on different forms of supervision. That's criminal supervision, criminal release, including federal supervised release. You are allowed to register to vote and cast your ballot. Formerly incarcerated people with no active parole term, even if you were on parole, if you have no active term, meaning it's completed or disactive for some reason, you are allowed to vote. Houseless folks, people who don't have a permanent address, but you still are a citizen over 18 and you live in this state, you are still allowed to vote. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about how that looks when you're trying to register if you are houseless. And there are several different community-based organizations that do really intentional efforts to get ballots and registration to folks that are formerly incarcerated who are currently incarcerated in county jails. So if y'all are interested in that type of work, I'm happy to include those orgs and their links in the presentation when I send it to the group. Some people might learn better if I do it on the flip side. So who cannot vote? Again, people who are under age 18. However, you can pre-register, again, to vote in this election if you are going to be 18 by November 3rd, 2020. You can also pre-register as early as age 16, and it'll be automatically active once you become age 18. So 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register, so your information is already in the state system. Again, you cannot vote if you are currently incarcerated in state or federal prisons. You cannot vote if you are on parole for conviction of a felony. As we've heard, there's some great propositions. One of them is Prop 17 that will be on the ballot this November that can help restore the right to vote for people on parole in California. So there may be change coming in that requirement, but to vote in this November election, people who are on parole for felony convictions are still barred. The last one is a special category of people who might be found mentally incompetent to vote by a court. That would usually involve some existing court case. They may be mentally incompetent for a whole variety of reasons, maybe because of age or disease, anything like that. But it'd have to be something that is court ordered. So those are specific groups of folks who cannot vote. And again, folks who are under 18 can still pre-register to vote as early as age 16. If you want to receive your ballot, you must again be registered. The different ways to register is online with the Secretary of State. I'll be including those links and giving into more detail throughout the presentation. There's also the in-person county elections office. I know there's probably COVID restrictions about hours or how many folks can be in the building at a time, but we do have county elections offices. The county buildings are located in different cities in the Bay Area, so you can look for the one nearest to you if you prefer to walk in or fill out a paper registration form. You can also submit your registration by mail. You can request that the county office send you application by mail so that you can return it by mail. To register to vote, you do have to present some form of identification. If you're mailing this in, you would need to make copies and attach those with your mailings. If you're doing it online, you'll have to enter the numbers on your driver's license or the specific identification that you are going to use to verify yourself. Here I've listed a few of the forms of identification. I'll read them out, especially if people are on the phone and not able to see the slides. Some acceptable forms are your driver's license, a passport, actually a copy of a recent utility bill, your voter guide that the county sends to you, or other government documents. For them to stand up to identification purposes, they should be dated within the election period and include your full name and address, and the address that you're trying to register with, to establish that that is your address and your identity. Official California state ID cards, student ID cards, military IDs, insurance plan IDs, public housing IDs. There's actually 20 plus more different ways or combinations that you can establish your identification. And so I have the link to the full list because there's a lot to list here and to list out. And if they cannot verify your identity, if you don't provide any information or don't attach those copies, if you're submitting an application by mail, then your mail-in votes may not be opened and cannot be counted if they can't verify that you should be a California voter. Your address. So again, people who are unhoused, people who have, whatever specific issues with listing a specific address, there's a few different ways you can still register to vote. Voters' residence for purpose of registration is the address that you specify. Acceptable forms, meaning the ones that will make sure that your registration is processed and approved, is that you only include one address to register with, even if you live at 2 properties or own 2 properties, or if you move around a lot, you still want to list your primary address, the address where you might be found the most. If you are in the military service and have to be stationed somewhere else for that service, you can still use your California resident address. If you're a student, whether you're out of state student or you're in a whole different area of the state that you're from, you can either choose to register at the address where you live when you're in school or the address where you live when you're out of school. It's your choice. You can think about how you want your vote to impact the area around you, since you'd be able to vote in the local area races wherever you're registered at. And courts have specifically preserved and protected the right for houseless folks to register, even without a specific building address. The location just must be specific and descriptive enough for the state to verify that the person is a California resident and should be able to vote in a particular area of the state. I've seen folks who go out to do some of this advocacy suggest that houseless folks can register with, maybe a nearby church. If the church has a program for them, they can register also with the nearby intersection. So there's different ways to think about how to describe enough so that folks who are unhoused are able to still register and to vote and participate in our democracy. Mailing addresses in those cases are not required on the application, but you should still strive to provide as much detail as you can to, again, make sure that the registration is approved. A little bit about deadlines. So we are, in the midst of election season. I'm getting a bunch of emails and calls every day from candidates and campaigns working on these propositions. So there's a lot going on because the deadlines are approaching very soon. So in around a month, mail-in ballots will begin to be sent. Based on the COVID-19 guidelines, our governor has issued an executive order that will automatically send any and every registered California voter a mail-in ballot. So people who've been registered for 20 years, who've never requested mail-in ballot, you will still receive a mail-in ballot. It doesn't matter what preference you check on your registration, how long you've been registered for any certain preference, you will still get a mail-in ballot because of the executive order to ensure, and it's a way to try to ensure that the most people are still able to exercise the right to vote, given all of the restrictions due to COVID and people who are themselves suffering with COVID. There will not be sample ballots sent. So starting in around a month, you'll be receiving mail-in ballots, which are the real ballots, not the fake ones. On October 19th, 15 days before the election date, is the deadline to register online or by regular mail. Again, when you register, you will still automatically receive mail-in ballots regardless of what preference you select when you register. 7 days before the election, your registration can only be done at county election offices. Again, I'll include links about how to contact our county office of our county registrar of voters office at the end of the presentation. The election date and deadline to register, November 3rd is the election date. You can always register on site at polling locations in person or at the local county elections office. It has to be done in person, and you'll receive a provisional ballot on the spot. Again, you'd want to bring form of identification that are listed out and we previously discussed. to make sure that you have no issue being able to register and exercise your right to vote, even on the day of the election. So even if you're a procrastinator, even if there was some problem with previous attempts to register, you can still go and register in person, making sure you bring some identification to establish your geographic location, your residence in that area to be able to vote. So how to submit your ballot. So everyone's gonna get a mail-in ballot. Some people have never voted by mail before. Some people have never wanted to vote by mail before, even though it has been an option in California. So it's important to go over some of the different ways that you can return your mail-in ballot once you've completed it. You can return it using regular mail, drop it in any mailbox, return it to the post office directly. No postage is required. It's already prepaid first class. So the return envelopes already come with it. Once you fill out and complete your ballot, you put it inside the envelope, seal it. There is a signature flap, and you can again drop it in any post box or post office. They must be postmarked by 8 p.m. on November 3rd, which is election day. And they have to be received to the state elections office by November 20th, 2020. By statute, it's 17 days after the election date. And again, want to bring up voter suppression is real and is happening in this country and certainly in our county. As y'all may have been aware, there were post office boxes removed from downtown Oakland that we've had our congresswoman and our mayor respond to the federal government and to the Postal Service, demanding that they be replaced and sent back. And I believe there's an agreement to do so. I have not seen confirmation that they were put back. But knowing that the Postal Service and our federal government can just quickly remove people's access to post boxes, that might be easier to access than having to drive to an actual post office or wait in line at a post office just to drop off something that's already prepaid postage. So that is a reality that's happening. It's still a possibility for that to happen again or for it to happen more or in different parts of our county leading up to and at the election date. So be very wary of using the Postal Service. Make sure that you are, aware of what is happening with some of the Postal Service boxes if they've been removed. I'm hearing some hours have been cut at some post offices. So be very vigilant about sending them early. Early is the recommendation if you're going to send it through the mail service, just because it's a bit unstable and is being threatened, really as a way to try to discourage people from voting and to try to disenfranchise folks who are going to be voting. So another option to submit your completed mail-in ballot, sealed, signed in your envelope, is to drop it in a county drop box. So our county is in charge of administering these systems of boxes. And they try to make it easier and in addition to the Postal Service options so that there's more locations. Hopefully it's more accessible to everyone around our county. Here's an example of what one of them looks like. You may have seen them. There's some around courthouses and other key locations in the county. If you look at the map where the cursor is, we have, this is the county's website, which is linked below. This kind of shows visually where the drop boxes are located. The blue ones are the ones that are already there. The yellow ones are the pending ones. So they're pending approval or pending installation. So I know that some of the information will change, and that's very important for me to note that it's not completely set where all of the Dropbox locations are going to be. Hopefully there will be a lot more added and all of them that are pending will be approved. So keep looking at this website at the county for more updated information. Hopefully they'll be very proactive about getting that out to voters as well. But want to be clear that they're pending locations where we're hoping to see the Dropbox locations and hoping to see even more on the map. And this is part of the county's website, which mentions voting early, that there are specific walk-in sites where you can drop off your ballot physically that's separate from these boxes, which is not staffed by a person all the time. And so you can look by city within the county to find a physical location if you already want to complete your ballot October 5 and start to drop them off in person. If not, you have the county box options, and the county then is responsible for sending them to the state elections office, or you can again drop them for free in any mailbox or a blue bin or at the postal service. You can also have somebody else drop them off for you, especially in person at polling locations. To make sure that your ballot is not rejected for having a different person dropping off your ballot, you need to make sure you fill out the authorization that's located on the back of the envelope. So the fields are already there for you. You just need to fill in the name of the person, their relationship to you, who's going to drop it off, and then sign the declaration, print your name, and the address that you're voting from, which should match your voter registration. So this is a sample from the state of California's page of what the envelope designs may look like. They have one from 2018, so I don't know if they're gonna have a new design for this election, but it should always be located on the back of the envelope. And you have to make sure you complete that so that there's no issue with them accepting somebody else taking your ballot for you. If you are the person who's taking someone's ballot and dropping it off for them at polling sites or at drop boxes, you are not allowed to receive payment per ballot. That there are state laws that prohibit any incentives for money incentives for people voting, unfortunately. Again, polling locations. So you can drop off a completed ballot in either their postal bins at the post office, at physical early voting sites that are run by the county or by the county-run drop bins. But you also can walk into polling locations, again, on the day of the election, November 3rd. Location hours are listed here, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You must be standing in line to cast a ballot at the poll. But if you're dropping off your location, you need to, again, have your ballot completed, have it already sealed and signed. And they usually have a special bin for people who are dropping off their mail-in ballots. And again, you can have a different person go to a polling location to drop off your completed and sealed ballot, as long as you complete the additional section on the envelope, verifying that they can do that for you. If you did not receive a mail-in ballot for any reason, you've been waiting for it, if you've already requested another one, if you've been told that you received one but didn't actually get it in the mail, you need to go and make sure you can cast your vote in person. And so polling locations are the place that you do that. Your polling location will vary, and it's based on what your address is. That they attempt to have a lot of polling locations so that you can walk. They should usually be within a few blocks. That is expected to change dramatically due to COVID. COVID concerns about safety of people coming to the locations, but also poll workers and even people wanting to be working as poll workers during the season. So there's still some ambiguity and uncertainty about how many polling locations there will be and what specific COVID restrictions will be in place for those locations. So follow the county's information, and hopefully they'll be proactive in pushing that out to you all. Again, finding it right now, you can look at your voter guides. I know Didi said she had her. So I have an example of mine from March, and on the very back of the booklet, on the bottom page, at the bottom half of the page, it lists your polling location. So it tries to make it very easy. If you received your voter guide in the mail, it should also include your polling location specific based on your address of where you're registered. You can also go to Alameda County's website. You can look up your voter registration, and it will have your voter profile in their tool that tells you different races that are going to be on your ballot. It tells you deadlines and tells you your history of your voter registration, as well as where your polling place is located. You can also download their list of all of the polling precincts within the county. Again, it may be hard to figure out what my precinct is. I'm not sure. The easiest way is to look at your voter guide. It should already state the polling place on the back of it. And if not, then go and input your specific voter information on the county's website and what will pull it up for you. And I would check close to the election date, since again, it's still a bit uncertain right now how many polling places there will be and how staffed they'll be, how much capacity they will have. Some tips for voting at the polls. So if you still are going to exercise your right to vote at the polls, there will be polling locations open for people who do not receive mail-ins, for people who are not able to register for any number of reasons, people who missed the deadline. So you still have the option and the right to walk into the polls on November 3rd. To be allowed legally to vote, you have to be in line to vote. So it's fine if you still are waiting. If you're the 100th person in line, which has happened in other states in voting earlier this year. But if you are at least in the line for to get inside the polling location by 8 p.m., the poll workers can still cut off the line wherever it stands at 8 p.m. and still wait and have to keep it open to let all the people who were there during the cutoff time make sure they're able to get in and cast their ballot. I really recommend getting there early if you're going to cast your ballot in person at a polling site. Again, because there's going to be a lot of changes and limitations at the polls based on COVID restrictions necessary for people's health. And you don't want to have to be the last one in line and then extend hours into the night trying to exercise your right to vote. I know main question that I get is, what about people who work? What about people whose employers don't want them to vote or don't care about their rights to vote? By law, by state law, workers have a right of up to 2 hours to take off to vote without any loss of pay. If you do not have enough time to do so during your non-work hours. So if you have a schedule that permits you to get to the polls, to be able to wait in line if necessary, and again, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on November 3rd. If you are able to get to the polls within that time frame that doesn't conflict with your work schedule, then you need to go to the polls and figure out what works for your schedule. If there's no way you can do that without conflicting with your paid work, then you have a right to still take off 2 hours and get paid for that time. To exercise this right, though, it is important that you notify the employer in writing that you need this time off to exercise your right to vote. It has to be given to the employer at least 2 business days or working days before the election. So you have plenty of time now, again, around a month before the mail-in ballots drop. Election day is November 3rd. So it's around 2 months to figure out if you're going to have a work conflict. If you believe so, if you know so, make sure you send a notice in writing to the employer to make sure that you are able to get paid during the time you have to take off. Employers, to make sure that you know about this, are required by law to post a notice about these very rights in the workplace at least 10 days before the election. So hopefully employers are going to abide by those, but if not, you all are empowered to know that you have a right to preserve that by writing a notice to them, and you do not have to lose any money for exercising your democratic right to vote. Some suggestions on what to bring to the polls. Again, your ID is one of the most important. It's best practice to always have it on hand, especially if you're a first-time voter. I know that I've been voting, the last several years in the same address, and then all of a sudden I wasn't on the list. I also moved in a year or so ago, and was not familiar with the polling place and was told I wasn't on the list and that I was registered as mail-in. So you never know what can happen. You never know what can get mixed up with technology if you're doing online registration. California also purged millions of voters from their rolls for things like double addresses or double names that seem to be voter fraud or that seem to be errors. So again, it's important to always check your voter status to make sure you're registered, under the name, under the party, under the address that you believe you've been registered at, even if you've been registered 50 years. You still need to check it based on a lot of the recent practices of our voter and election offices. And so bring ID to the polls with you. Bring some glasses, very practical. You know, you have to read a paper ballot that they may hand you. You may want to bring your voter guide and look through it again if you didn't have a lot of time to review it before. So make sure you have what you need to accommodate yourself to be able to adequately view it and to complete it. You know, it's going to be hard for you to, come back. That's not going to be allowed. So you need to have everything you need with you when you step into the polling place. And again, I suggest bringing your county election voter guide. It's sent to you beforehand so that you have a chance to look through more background information about candidates and about the different ballot measures. You have a chance to look at sample ballots and practice filling out and marking who you would like to vote for, and that will help if you have a really long ballot in your city or county. It'll help it go faster, especially if we end up with really long lines of people. That we want to try to be respectful to other folks after us to be prepared and informed about what our vote may look like. Again, poll workers cannot give you advice. They can't explain to you what something is or who a candidate is. They can't tell you how you should vote, and they cannot physically do the ballot for you. So again, be prepared, have everything you need, and try to be efficient with your time, given we're not sure what the capacity of polling locations are going to be. A few more tips about going to the polls on election day. Get in line early. I cannot stress this enough. Don't wait. You don't want to be, trying to make it to the last second. You don't want to risk not being able to cast your vote because you missed the 8 p.m. cutoff. Again, work shouldn't get in the way if you are thinking about it at least a few days before and give that notice that you need to take off work at least 2 hours. And 2 hours hopefully will be enough for you to wait in line if there is a line. Be prepared, if it's hot, if it's raining, whatever you may need, if it's standing outside, given that it's COVID, and you may not be able to crowd inside a building if you're waiting in line at the polls. The hours are again 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., all polling locations on election day. Review your county information before, again, in your voter guide. Everyone who's registered in this county will get a guide sent out by our county. Complete only the ballot materials and submit only the materials that are given to you by poll workers. Use the pens that are provided to you by poll workers. Your ballot guides remind you that you can only use blue or black ink. So if you bring your own pen and you're feeling real patriotic and fill it out in bright red, your ballot will be rejected. You can only fill it out in blue or black ink. So it's best and safest to go with whatever pens and materials are provided by the poll workers. Do not harass poll workers. A lot of them may be under stress or are putting their lives at risk to be doing this service and have polling locations open for people to have the option to vote in person. And sometimes they have to take, people's frustration, people's tension, or even people who are, just very, very riled up about certain candidates or about certain propositions. So please just remember, a lot of them are community members who are, normally do public service and who want to make sure that our community has polling locations. So I would, advocate to make sure we just treat folks with respect and be patient with them, especially if there's lines. You are prohibited by law from wearing or displaying anything advocating for a specific candidate or measure. So that it can be a fine line. So it would be okay to wear like a Democrat shirt that just says Democrat. But if there's a race where a specific Democrat is on the ballot against a different candidate from a different party, and you had that person's face and name on your t-shirt, or waving a flag that had, their campaign logo and website on it, that would not be allowed inside the polling location. You would have to take it off or cover it up if you were going to go inside to cast your ballot. You can have those materials as long as they're within 100 feet away from the polling location. So even candidates or people who are working on ballot measure campaigns who like to be outside of polling places to remind voters, the last second to go vote for them. They cannot be talking to you, handing materials, or have their materials within 100 feet of a polling location. So there should be a barrier, one, for you to have some space away from maybe some political propaganda that you're not interested in, but also just be aware of what you may be wearing. Even buttons, things like that. If poll workers notice it and ask you to take it off, that is why. And you should comply with them, because they may deny you the ability to vote because you are violating election law or what you're wearing. So be mindful. Again, you cannot wear anything advocating for a specific candidate or measure that is on the ballot that you are voting in. A little bit about what's on your ballot. And we're almost towards the end, y'all. And I want to hear from y'all, or what y'all's comments, what your feedback is, and especially what issues we still need to be tackling to ensure people get to the polls in our county. Make sure to vote all the way down the ballot. So this is a big election year. There was a big race in March, and there's a lot of runoff elections that are going to be happening in this November. A lot of people are paying attention because there's a presidential election that's going to be on the ballot. But there's so many more that we want to just alert you all to what they can be, to make sure that you're aware that you have the power to vote in so many other races and affect different parts of your city and your civic life besides just the presidential race this November. So some of the examples are other federal offices, including Congress, and this might be specific to the districts you live in that overlap and cut through our county. State ballot measures, as we heard today, excellent presenters before me talked about measures that can help workers, measures that can help our students, measures that can help with racial justice overall, measures that will help with criminal justice overall, that we have the ability to put into effect in reality in November. County ballot measures, county elected offices. We have a judge office for Alameda County on our ballot. And we also have, I believe, 2 Board of Supervisor seats, but it depends if you live in those districts. So again, depending on what city or specific county district you live in, you may have these offices on your ballot or not. City ballot measures, city office elections, including city council or city attorney. Again, depends on what city you're in. These offices cycle on different year cycles or different district cycles, depending on where you live. School board candidates are on the ballot, certainly in Oakland, certainly in Berkeley. BART director, depending on what district, I believe there's 2 or 3 BART director seats that are going to be on the ballot. Also special districts, things like water board. These are all elected positions, individuals that you have the power to vote for and put into office to represent you and make decisions that affect things like your children, our schools, our water, our money, right, our housing, our healthcare. And it also is a time for you to learn about some of the measures and the possibilities that we can bring to your state or county level based on whether our measures are going to pass or not, right? Us repealing Prop 209 can open vast number of possibilities and dramatically change the way a lot of our groups even do our work and are able to serve people. So it's important to not just focus on one race or the biggest race at the federal level, but to also know what races you may also be able to vote in and affect in your locality. The best way to know is to look at your voter guide. I'm jealous that Ndidi has hers for this November. Mine is from March. I haven't got mine yet. But your guide, again, is going to be key to your address, to your voting precinct. So it will have the races that you're going to be voting in specific. So if you're not sure if there's city council races for your specific area, you'll know when you get your voter guides. And I'm not going to talk about any specific candidates. You heard about some of the specific measures that our groups are supporting. Candidates, you can usually find out from the city clerk or from the county clerk who has been registered and whose names will be listed on the ballot. They may or may not have, those candidates' websites or contact information. It also may not be a good sign if you haven't heard of a candidate or they haven't reached out to you and you live in their district. So think about those things as well. But it is, there are some tools, including, the registration info and your registrar guide, but sometimes you do have to hunt down who are these people. And I always prefer to find out if there's recordings of them talking about the issues themselves, if they've issued a formal platform or like a 100-day plan, or, their top 3 priorities to get a sense of how they compare to other candidates. I just want to give a really quick example of the voter guide, and I'll try to do it live on the video instead of through photos. The voter guide, again, has things like sample ballot, where it'll show you what to expect the formatting even to look like, how to fill in the tiny bubbles, again in blue or black ink, next to the person's name you're voting for. It tells you the name of the race. It tells you the name of the race above the block, and it also tells you how many you can vote for. How many you can vote for. That is important, especially from our county races, and many of our cities within our county have something called ranked choice voting. That's a whole different presentation in and of itself about what ranked choice voting is, what it means, how votes are counted. But the basics of what it means for you all is you get 3 votes in certain county and city elections, meaning you get to vote for your top 3 people and not just one. And so reading in your ballot guides before the election, it tells you how many you can vote for. An example from that guide was the presidential race, where it says vote for 1. But if I turned the other page, it would have been the central committee, and it says vote for 11, right? So someone might have just said, oh, okay, vote, and here's a bunch of people, there was a lot of candidates, and they might have just selected 1. But the voter guide is going to tell you, even when you have the options and how each specific office is going to work and how many votes you have to cast in them. So on that ballot, you would have been able to check off 11 different people's names. And something that is very little discussed or people don't necessarily pay attention to is there's always a write-in option where you can write in any person's name. You can write in your own name, you can write in any word. It will be tallied and reported with results. And there are some people who actually run write-in campaigns that are officially trying to get elected to an office, but maybe did not file to get on the ballot officially in time, and they'll run a write-in campaign. So the write-in is there for people who are trying to run write-in campaigns, and if you don't like any of the options that are listed, you can always write in your own choices. So again, it's important to look at what is on the ballot in all of the races and all the measures you have the power to vote in, to know how many votes you will have to cast in each of those races, and to try to prepare yourself so that you're not overwhelmed, so that you don't need to take a break and you're not going to be able to come back at a polling location. So again, the best research you can do before the election date to look at summaries that'll be included in your ballot guide, and to rely on organizations like those hosting this event that you trust and that work directly with our communities of which ballot measures they support and why, how it will affect and advance their work. So finishing up, once you've already submitted your ballot, a lot of people want to know that their ballot actually got counted, right? There's, again, a lot of voter suppression. where people feel like if they put it in a post box and the post boxes are then removed the next day, is my vote really counted? A lot of folks don't feel that their vote matters and that it literally will not be counted or received by the state. So there's a few ways that you can track what happens once you've submitted your ballot. If you've done a mail-in, you can go to where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov and you can sign up to receive automatic emails, texts, or calls about the status of your ballot. If you do a ballot in the polls, live at a polling location, they rip off a receipt stub that's attached to the end of whatever ballot they hand you on site. And that receipt stub will have your tracking number that you can enter into the state election system to again track where the ballot that matches your receipt number is at in the process of getting to the state office and getting counted. All ballots must be counted unless it was dropped off by someone other than you and you did not sign that authorization that is required on the envelope. You were not registered to vote. You never registered, you never proved your identification. There's no record of you or that you have a right to vote in the state. Or it was received after 17 days after the election, meaning was not received by November 20th. I do recommend that you track your ballots, that you feel comfortable and have some peace of mind, and that you submit complaints and contact the Secretary of State if there is something that is off or an error about your ballot tracking. But there are options, and it is a state requirement that they track your ballot and have some way to verify that they've received it. I do want to do a little plug for poll workers. Again, I mentioned it's a little unsure what's going to happen with our polls into November, how many poll workers we'll have, given people are vulnerable to COVID, people have other obligations with the shifting of our communities during COVID. And so I want to encourage people who feel that they are eligible and are healthy and able-bodied, who maybe are more privileged and not at risk of COVID as others, to be able to apply to be a poll worker. I've included the link to applications to the Alameda County vote site, acvote.org. Eligibility, you need to be a registered voter of Alameda County or the state of California, or legal permanent resident green card holders, or high school student workers, or Alameda County employees, or California state employees. Right, so any of those are eligible types of people who can apply to work at a poll. And again, I've talked a bit about the hours of the actual election day and some of the uncertainty to expect. But I think the more poll workers that we have that are willing to give the time and the energy on that day, the more we'll be able to consider more polling locations and options. And again, many people need it if they're not able to receive a mail-in ballot, if something went wrong with their registration, if they didn't register in time. Language assistant needs, I've just cut and pasted some of the specifics for our county that was included in the posting. So especially if you know people or have these language fluencies and competencies, to encourage them to work at the polls so that people who may be only monolingual speakers are able to have language access at the polls, have poll workers who can communicate and assist them. Here's just the ending slide, and if we have time, I'm not even sure where I'm at with time, Didi, but if we have time, would love to have some discussion or other folks' questions or input. Just have a few main links here to Alameda County Registrar of Voters, acvote.org. Their office is located downtown Oakland. They also have a phone number to contact. Secretary of State has a free voter hotline where you can go really for any issues you're having with mail-in, if you need language assistance, other accommodations, complaints about election sites. The number is 800-345-VOTE. And you can also go to their website for very detailed info, including a lot of the elections codes and really specific regulations about what your rights are. Follow Afrikan Black Coalition at A Black Coalition. We'll be releasing our own voter guide to help guide our students and young people and educate them, especially about the propositions that will be on our ballot, and to help so that people are empowered to know what the effect of their votes in either direction would mean. Also, American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California has several different voting guides and resources, especially those who are interested in working with people who are currently incarcerated in county jails. That's aclunc.org/vote. And I'm happy to drop other groups that are doing some direct outreach to folks in county jails. Again, open it up, throw it back to you, Didi.
Yes, thank you so much, Allyssa. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I don't. And so thank you so much for giving us this presentation and really taking us through, you know, what may come up and how to respond to certain things. I did want to just highlight one thing is just that you can get your ballot and your voter guide in your preferred language. And so for some folks who go to the polls, who English is not their first language, they tend to go to the polls because they can get all of their information translated. And so if you are doing your mail-in votes, you can also get it in your preferred language. I do have some questions though. So what day should we be turning in our ballots? A person like me, the day I get it is the day I'm gonna fill it out and get it back to, and get it to the mail so I don't have to worry. But what day should we be turning in our ballots?
As early as possible. So you can get your ballot on the 5th is probably the earliest anyone should receive their ballot in the mail. You can fill it out on the 5th, put it back in the mailbox the same day. Again, especially if you are returning it by mail service, you should do it October, I would say. I really don't trust any of their time estimates. They're admitting there's certainly delay even in first class guaranteed timelines. I still don't trust their estimated revised timelines. I would say at least October for any type of mail sending.
Absolutely, and red and or not red, black and blue ink only.
Yes.
If you fill it out at home, black and blue ink only.
Fill out the sample guide if it helps you first, so that you're just repeating what you've already really studied and focused on. It says it, let me show you. It says it on the very first page, right? You open the cover, the very first.
Yes.
Only blue or black ink, no red, no green, no glitter. So again, just try to make sure that you are only using the specific lines, colors that they've instructed you to do. You know, fill in the circle, don't color outside the circle. Yeah. What's some of your other questions?
My other questions is, what could they possibly turn you away for at the polling location? Because I just, want to give folks what they need to advocate if they get like a no answer at the poll.
Again, you can be turned away if you're not there in line by 8 p.m. So there's a strict time cutoff. They can't do anything about it. They're allowed to, tell you need to leave. You won't have a right to get a ballot and be admitted to the polling site. You can be turned away if you are trying to register on site, if they don't have any record of your registration and you're not able to establish your identification. If you haven't brought anything with you, if there's a question of if you're not able to establish that you have a right to vote in California or in this county precinct, then they can turn you away. You should try to come back if you have time, get some other identification options if you have them at your disposal, but that is a reason they can turn you away if they're not able to verify. They're not going to give you a ballot. And certainly if there's, again, harassment or any type of assaults on poll workers, which is unlawful in general, but are, special category given the importance of election workers. So they're allowed to remove you from polling locations for, criminal type of reasons as well.
Yes. Oh, and so that brings up something else for me. So for folks, we are under a mask mandate, and I don't see us coming out of this mask mandate before election time. So that is an easy way to get turned away from your polling location, is if you don't want to wear your mask to go in and vote. Please don't let that be the thing that stops you from exercising your rights during this critical time.
Absolutely. I see that expanding to, again, any COVID related rules that, like I said, there's so much uncertainty on what they're going to be. And, I'm afraid that it is going to deter people, because if they're not exactly clear, how can they make sure that they're prepared or in compliance? And it may be a way to easily turn away folks or to unequally enforce those type of rules. So again, I hope, there's some way we can provide updated info that the county will be really intentional in making sure it's clear, explicit, posted outside polling locations, would be my recommendation, to make sure that people are equipped and empowered to know what poll workers have a right to tell them, what are the official guidelines they've established. So I see it masked, but also like, oh, you're not being, distant enough, you're not 6 feet apart. So there may be a lot of other restrictions, like on how many people can be inside a location or wait inside this area or even be in a parking lot. I'm hoping it's not gonna be too complex and complicated for people to exercise their rights. But it's a possibility that we can't ever just look past.
And then my last question, does your federally non-compliant identification work? Or do I need to ensure that I have my real ID in order to vote at the polls?
You are not limited to just the real ID. And there's a whole list of 20 plus different identifications under California state law where you have to be able to receive a ballot. Unfortunately, there aren't as many protections in other states, but you do have a wide range of certain identifications, certainly photo IDs, and again, coupled with documents like those establishing your address. I would say bring as many options, just to be on the safe side, keep them in your glove compartments, just on deck in case people are gonna question you or make it an issue. Also for folks who may have become US citizens, you simply already having registration verified and your registration card is enough to establish your citizenship. You cannot be harassed to prove anything else about your citizenship or your countries of origin, even if it's not the US. That once you've already been verified as a voter and are registered to vote, the poll workers or any people on site shouldn't be asking about citizenship papers, anything like that.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have any questions from our attendees? Thank you, Allyssa. This is like vastly comprehensive. And so I will be holding on to this presentation for myself, and we will be sharing it out with everyone who has attended. But I will definitely keep this for myself to pull out on October 5th when we get our ballots, so I can check everything and be just sure that my ballot is counted. I'll give folks a couple moments if they would like to ask any specific questions of Allyssa. All right, I'll give folks some more moments to manage the tech. I know it's difficult during COVID.
Yeah, I also want to mention, I know some people do like ballot parties where they'll like talk about the ballots together and really, maybe debate candidates or measures or try to understand complex ones together and make sure that they complete them so that, their whole network or friend circle did their ballots together, and that may also be a good place to have one person collect them and drop them off with the authorizations. So I've been seeing some really creative ways that people are trying to just directly engage and make it easier for people to get their ballots in and filled out.
Yes, and big reminder to folks, if you don't have enough money for the postage, you can stick that ballot in there with no postage on it, and it must get delivered. California is very lucky, unlike quite a few states in the US, where we don't have to pay for our ballots to get mailed out and sent out. And so that's just a big reminder for folks. Do not let a stamp stop you from voting. Yes, thank you, thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you, Allyssa, for giving us this robust teach-in. A couple of folks asked for slides already, and we will get slides all packaged up for you. We are going to move into our keynote address. I want to share screen again so that we can adequately introduce Demetrius. And so I'm going to pass this over to Baba Joe Brooks, who is going to introduce Demetrius Burnett for us. Baba Joe?
Unmuting myself. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody is enjoying this afternoon and this powerful set of webinars that we've had, informing us and getting us ready for the struggle and battle ahead. So I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to introduce Demetrius Bennett. Brother Bennett is a worshiper, a preacher, a poet, and writer who seeks to serve an audience of one. Wow. Think about that. Think about that for a minute or two. So professionally, Demetrius works to address the affordable housing crisis in the Bay Area while helping nonprofit organizations gain funding as a program officer at the San Francisco Foundation. I am so pleased to be able to mention the fact that he's associated with the San Francisco Foundation, where I was a program officer 22 years ago in the same category of activity that he's doing funding for. And I'm so pleased to see a brother such as Demetrius, so to speak, follow in the pathway that has been set there by someone that he used to work for, Landon Williams, and the terrific program staff at the San Francisco Foundation. So I'm also wanting to mention the fact that Demetrius is a graduate of Brown University, as well as has a master's degree from the Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California. He's an author of a book, Sermons Will Ruin Your Life, that captures the unique experience of the preacher as they endure the process of sermon writing and experience the burden and beauty of pursuing God's will. Wow, I got to go back to church. I got to go back to church on that, Brother Demetrius. Also, we're hoping that, and by the way, and I should not ever miss something like this, he's not out there by himself. He has someone that has his back, and someone that I'm sure he has the back of, his wife. And that is, he's married to LaVonda Hayes Burnett, also a published author and founder of Zion Learning in-Home Tutoring. Together they strive to advance the gospel as they serve their community. We're hoping and looking forward to Demetrius this evening, really bringing forth in these uncertain times, which also is a time for us to see the challenge ahead of us in terms of finding a silver lining to get busy and work, and really to address the issues that really, quite frankly, the East Bay Anti-Displacement Collective embraces. That is the idea of keeping people safe, building community power, improving the quality of life, and stopping the cultural displacement of people of color. We're hoping that he will be addressing that and making reference to that. And also this pandemic that we're in, the wildfires, the uprisings, if you will, of Black folks in the context of Black Lives Matter, the misconduct and the out of control police forces, and taking this moment to change our thinking from just passing reformative policies, but to maybe passing policies that are liberatory, transformative, and that address the reparative needs in our society. So thank you, Brother Demetrius. We look forward to your words of wisdom, knowledge, and action.
All right. So we have Brother Demetrius. Let's make sure they're online.
Yep, I'm here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, first, definitely want to say thank you to Baba Joe for that, incredible introduction. It's truly an honor for me to be in relationship with you and then to have you introduce me as one of my predecessors in this role and someone that I definitely learned from and appreciate. So thank you for that introduction. As always, whenever I get up to speak, I have to say thank you to God. Any opportunity that there is to be before God's people, no matter the setting, is a privilege and not a right. So for that, God, I'm grateful to this East Bay Anti-Displacement Collective, this core group who I've had the pleasure of working and serving with now for a couple of years. It has truly been a gift to work with you, and I esteem it as a high honor that you would ask me to invite me to hold this space as keynote speaker. And I guess I said I do the best I can with this space for the time we're together. And then to everyone, of course, who are on the call today, just want to appreciate your commitment to our own liberation and freedom and revolution, that you would come today to make sure that you have the opportunity to learn about what's on the ballot and what it is that we are responsible for in this next moment. So with all the thanks there, and of course, thanks to the San Francisco Foundation leadership and my team members there who work with me on this project, Laji Dua, the Place team, Fred, Michelle, shout out to all of them. It was for San Francisco Foundation, really grateful to be working there and doing this labor of love with you. That being said, let's get to it. Talk on this subject, this theme of going from policy to revolution. I don't know about y'all, but I am tired. Tired of not being able to breathe, at least deeply, for one reason or another. Can't breathe because of COVID. Can't breathe because of fires and smoke that surround Alameda County and Oakland on both sides, with flames and smoke from the south and flames and smoke from the north. I am tired of not being able to breathe from being Black in America. Being young and gifted and Black in this time, in this moment, is taxing. And if we're honest, just being a member of these yet to be United States of America is exhausting. Furthermore, then I am asked, and we are asked to participate in the political process of the very same system that so often seems designed to seek and to kill and to destroy me. The same system built on the bedrock of genocide and displacement of indigenous peoples. The same system that has built its economy off the bodies of African enslaved people in America. The same system that came out of Reconstruction with this brand new and shiny thing called Jim and Jane Crow. The same system that denied women the right to vote through 18 whole amendments until it gave them what they owe. The same system that created the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Japanese internment camps. The same system that makes a living on Black and brown bodies and mass incarceration. You do know that slavery is still legal in the 13th Amendment as long as you are incarcerated. The same system that deports refugees back to the deaths that they were trying to escape. The same system that cages children and builds walls instead of bridges. This is the same system you want me to participate in? This is the question I hear from so many discouraged members of our community. So many people who have looked like me and are about my age or a few years older and a few years younger, and so many people who have lost faith in our political system. Communities for whom the reply of, you know, our ancestors bled for this, you know, our ancestors died for this here right to vote, is becoming an increasingly insufficient answer. And this is the audience that I want to speak to today. This address is for those who have lost faith in our political system and the real power of our votes and participation in the political process. This address is for you. And yes, this address is still for those who are many of the folks on this call who are all in about civic engagement and the organizing process. For you, I hope these words serve as some type of talking points for those in your lives that you undoubtedly have who've lost faith in the power of our vote, in the power of engagement, and in our political system. For those who are struggling with seeing the real power of our civic role. This is the audience that I want to speak to, because this is really for all of us who are wrestling with this most pressing question of what do we do when the very same system that oppresses us requires us to participate in its political process in order to create revolution. What do we do when the same system that oppresses us requires us to participate in its political process in order to reach revolution? And to this question today, I would like to make this proposal. I'd like to propose that in order to answer this question, we must bring our souls to the polls and vote in a way that sets the people free. Let me say it again because you missed it. We need to bring our souls, our S-O-L-E-S, and our souls, our S-O-U-L-S, to the polls and vote in a way that sets our people free. And as I prepare for this, honestly, and even in making that proposition, I prepared and something occurred to me. I realized that there was some critical knowledge that perhaps we've known all along but haven't understood. And I know it had not grasped me as deeply as it did preparing for today. This critical knowledge that our ancestors have held on to in their fight for freedom that honestly we miss today. You see, our ancestors, and when I say our ancestors, I'm talking collective ancestors, because every revolution has always required ancestors of every race and religion and gender and identity, because every movement has required multiracial and multi-religious and multi-ethnic and multiple types of people coordinating across differences to help get our people more free than they've ever been before. This understanding is what our ancestors worked and fought with, the knowledge that this same system that oppresses us actually has a loophole. Yes, a loophole. The system has a loophole. A loophole is an aspect of a system's design, whether it is intentional or is a flaw. It's an aspect of the system's design that allows us to circumvent, to go around, or to otherwise avoid the purpose of the system. A loophole is often a flaw, or in this case, an intentional system design that allows me to leverage the system that was not intended to benefit me to ultimately work for my good. It is an opening in the structure that I can take advantage of to make it work for me. Let me put it this way. If the system was built to most privilege and benefit old white men and was never designed for me, a loophole allows me to have an opportunity to go and grab hold of a rope and grab hold of something in the system and pull it in the direction where I can come through and make it work for my good and make sure it includes people like me and those who are different and have also been excluded. Our ancestors worked the way that they worked, and they fought the way that they fought for the right to vote and the right to shape policy, because they recognized that there was an opening left in the system that would allow them to circumvent its purpose and create a revolution. They realize that no matter what this system has done to us, our social and political reality built within itself an opportunity for us to become the community we were always meant to be, because it has yet structured itself. A democracy. Yes, democracy. Democracy is the key word here, because yes, the yet to be United States of America is still in fact a democracy. Because words have meaning, this means a great deal for you and for me. You see, democracy is a government system. It's a social and governing system where the supreme power of the land is with the people. And unlike a truly fascist regime, unlike a true dictatorship, this system can be changed at the decree of its people. This is a loophole our ancestors have been fighting to take advantage of for centuries in each era and iteration of revolution. And each generation is tasked with the challenge of determining how it will use its power through that loophole until all people are free and equal and in right relationship with God and one another. This, quite honestly, is why voter suppression is so evident and so pervasive in our time. Voter suppression is a fight over that loophole. It's a fight for the majority control of our democracy, which is the foundational element to our power. What we need to realize is our democracy, the loophole is going to be used either way. Whether we vote or not, someone is going to use the loophole of voting and advocacy and lobbying. So for us, we can either take hold of our power, people power, or forfeit our power and allow our loophole to then become our noose. What we need to realize is in our democracy, the loophole is going to be used either way, and voting and advocacy as our loophole become our noose when we forfeit our power. In other words, what common saying is when you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And this is why I implore us today. This is why I propose for us today. This is why I challenge us today to bring our souls, our SOLES, and our souls, our SOULS, to the polls in November, whether in person or by mail, so we can show up and vote in a way that sets the people free. Because voting is indeed both a liberatory and a spiritual practice. We have the opportunity to work out our own salvation, at least in part at the ballot box. We have the opportunity to move our community closer to experiencing true racial and economic justice. It's a liberatory opportunity that sets us free a little more in the moment than we've ever been before and pushes us towards the ultimate liberation we're always trying to get to. And it's a spiritual practice, at least for me and my faith, and it can be a spiritual practice for you, because as a follower of the way, Jesus, when reading from the prophet Isaiah, said, I have come to give good news to the poor, to give sight to the blind, and to set the captives free. Therefore, at least for me and my house, when I show up at the voter's booth, it's a spiritual practice, because I'm showing up with my vote to vote in a way that sets the captive. And at the San Francisco Foundation, this is why we as an institution, this push towards racial and economic justice is why we as an institution are so committed to civic engagement and advancing our equity agenda. The San Francisco Foundation advocates and supports advocacy for a Bay Area where everyone can have a good and living wage job, where everyone can live in a safe and affordable neighborhood and home where they have culture and belonging, where everyone can exercise their political voice, their people power. That is what we call our Equity North Star. And that is why we see a historic opportunity on November 3rd of this year to pass some historic policies in the region and in the state of California that advance racial justice and economic inclusion for everybody. So now, you may be asking, well then, sure, vote. But how do we actually bring our souls to the polls? What does it actually look like to vote in a way that sets the people free? In order to bring our souls to the polls, we must use our vote in at least 3 ways. I don't remember if they told you this in the introduction or not, but I am a Baptist preacher, so you can't get out of here without 3 points, and then we're gonna go home. You gotta use your voice in at least 3 ways. We must use our vote to reduce harm, to restore lost rights and opportunity, and to reimagine our collective future. The first way we bring our souls to the polls is by using our vote to reduce harm. Thank you, Reverend Bill McBride, for that frame. Whenever we are trying to create a revolution, the first step is often to stop and reduce harm. If you're like me and you've ever been an athlete, or honestly, you're just someone of a certain age, you may be intimately familiar and have intimate knowledge with injuries. And we know that there are different levels of injuries, and the worst of them require surgery to repair. But oftentimes, for those that require surgery, before you can get to the surgery, the doctor may recommend a few things. It may recommend some ice. The doctor may recommend a prescription, may recommend a brace to reduce the swelling, to begin the healing process, to strengthen the muscles around the injured part, and to protect the injured part of the body from further harm until the surgery repair can be done. From 2015 to 2019, the point in time counts showed that the number of people experiencing homelessness or houselessness in Alameda County doubled within 4 years. Alameda County went from just over 4,000 people in 2015 to just over 8,000 people in 2019, January 2019, that we could count, who are experiencing houselessness and living on our streets. In November 2020, we have an opportunity to address this systemic and this moral injury. This is a systemic and a moral injury as we see so many people, more than 8,000 on the streets in our counties, more than half of them Black or African American, and too high a percentage of them being senior citizens living on the streets. We have an opportunity to address an injury that is no doubt in need of surgery for our housing market and economic system. And on November 3rd, there will be a measure in Alameda County that gives us the opportunity to at least reduce the harm, to get some ice, some compression, some elevation to the harm of those who are suffering in the streets through what's called Measure W. And Measure W is a 0.5 cent sales tax, meaning that the sales tax on our purchases will increase by 0.5%, but that revenue will go to fund solutions for our growing homelessness crisis. This measure alone could produce up to $150 million per year. $150 million per year in Alameda County to increase funding for not only homeless services, but also for homelessness prevention. Because the truth and our reality in the growing numbers is that people are going homelessness 2 and 3 times faster than we can get them off the street. Measure W could give revenue and resources to serve people who are currently experiencing this crisis, as well as preventing more from experiencing it. This measure could produce so much to help us begin to reduce the harm. And it's doing so with infrastructure being put in place to ensure accountability and integration of the lived experience and the voices of people most impacted by homelessness. Measure W presents an opportunity for us to use our voice to reduce the harm experienced by our community on the streets. Reducing harm is a part of liberatory practice. So let's bring our souls to the polls in Alameda County for Measure W. The second way that we can bring our souls to the polls is by using our vote to restore lost rights and opportunity. Unfortunately for us in the United States, our justice system is primarily built on principles of punitive justice or based on principles of punishment rather than of restorative justice or things that would restore those who have made decisions that brought them out of community contract and bring them back into right relationship with the community. In The Prodigal Son, a story that people of many and even no faiths are familiar with, it's an example of restorative principles at work over punitive ones. And oftentimes we stop the understanding of the value of the story in just understanding the story of the younger son, where we know the younger son who grew up in a wealthy family, asked for his inheritance from his father early, that he went out and he squandered it in the world till he found himself in a pig pen and came to himself and returned home. And when he came home, instead of anger, the father saw him from a distance and he ran to him. He threw a coat around him. He put the family ring back on his finger, just recognizing him as back a part of a full member of the family. And oftentimes we stop there. But what we don't realize is there's also a lesson in the older son. The older son who, when his brother came back and the party was thrown for him, he said, why is he getting a party? I've been here serving faithfully. I've been working. I've been building. I haven't disrespected you or done any of these things, Father. And he would rather see his brother punished or at least seen beneath rather than being restored as a full-fledged member of the family. We learn that the older brother was just as lost. We have to be mindful of our mindsets, and especially of propositions out there that come from the mindset of the older son. Propositions that are just as lost as the older son and would try to further criminalize and more severely punish our people instead of creating more opportunities for them to be restored as part of the family. Proposition 17, a proposition that would restore the right to vote for community members who are on parole for felony convictions, is an opportunity to use our vote to restore the right and opportunity that were lost to incarceration. Proposition 17 allows us to provide a safer return and greater reintegration into the community for returning citizens and formerly incarcerated members. Let's bring our souls to the polls across the state for Proposition 17. To give our community members a better opportunity to use their loophole, to use their voice and their advocacy sooner in their reintegration into community. Finally, the third way we bring our souls to the polls is by using our vote to reimagine our collective future. Thank you, Judith Bell, for that frame. To use our vote to reimagine our collective future. Go with me for a moment, if you can, and just imagine a world where every community is thriving and it has well-funded libraries and parks and schools, and the after-school programs are well-funded, and it has all the local resources it needs in every community for children and families to live, to learn, to work, to worship, to create, to truly thrive. Youth programming is properly funded. Public safety is more than giving money to police. There's sufficient funding for health and social services. Every Black and brown boy and girl, every Black and brown child has an opportunity to be equitably, to be fairly represented at every college and university throughout the state. A state that is home to some of the highest ranked universities in the world. And in this world that will be created, they would then become temporary homes of culture and belonging and growth and development of our college-age leaders, especially college-age leaders of color. This world would have contractors and developers of color and women-led organizations that have greater opportunity at getting government contracts rather than funneling them all to older white men-led organizations. Imagine this world with me for a moment. This world is the world that Proposition 15 and 16 are rooted in, the vision of creating. Prop 15, also known as Schools and Communities First, is a proposition which seeks to ensure the long-standing, high-earning institutions that have been building their wealth on the backs of Bay Area residents for decades will pay their fair share in property taxes. There are long-standing institutions and for-profit businesses like the Chevron that sits in Richmond that have been here for decades. And our people have worked there and helped them amass their wealth. But because of an intentional, systemically designed loophole, they've been paying below the market rate of property taxes. And what Schools and Communities First would like to do is for that small population of organizations and institutions is just to raise their property taxes to market rate. instead of a rate that's stuck in the 70s. And to be clear, this policy does not impact homeowners and residential properties. This policy does not impact agricultural properties. And there are actually protections for small businesses built within it. This policy just focuses on those high-earning institutions that have taken advantage of this systemic loophole to pay less than market value. And now we're saying it's time to pay your fair share. And by changing this rule for the small populations organizations, the amazing thing is that California can raise about 12 billion with a B per year for schools and communities throughout the state. Oakland and the Bay Area would actually receive some of the highest allocations of these resources in the state and would get them every year. By changing this rule, we could produce so much more revenue to have this vision of the future that we imagine together. And Prop 16 seeks to repeal the proposition that got rid of affirmative action, as we heard earlier today. Affirmative action in California was repealed in 1996 by Proposition 209. And as we look at the impacts of losing affirmative action nearly 25 years ago, we look at our UC school system today, and we see that less than 3% of those students are Black or African American. It's closer to 2% across the state of California. And at UC Berkeley, just around the corner, it's only 3 to 3.5% of the population are Black or African American. That math shakes out to about 1,000 students out of 31,000 are Black or African American. Prop 16 seeks to remove the ban on considering race and gender in college admissions, as well as in government contracting, so that a racial and a gender-based equity lens can be added back into the admissions and the contracting decision-making process. This would allow universities and government contract issuers to look at the holistic identity, experience, and merit of students and of organizations in their decision-makings for admissions and of granting government contracts. We need to bring our souls to the polls for Props 15 and 16. We need to vote for these measures ultimately because they are about reimagining our future and implementing policies that create transformative generational change for current and future generations. And after all, isn't that what we're really working for? Transformative generational change, change that is experienced now, that ripples across the generations in the advancement of justice. We must remember that transformative generational change is actually at the heart of revolution. At the core, all of these measures that we've discussed today and will be discussed next Thursday are about advancing racial and economic justice en route to revolution. We must remember this, because at the end of the day, we have to realize that our vote and our pursuit of policy change was never truly about the vote and the policies in and of themselves. They are means. They are vehicles towards liberation. They are some of our tools of revolution. And that's why we must bring our souls to the polls and pair that voting moment with an organized movement. We vote and we organize. We vote and we organize, not because it changes the whole system in a moment, but because it creates a sustained movement. We vote and we organize, not because we're just trying to check the box and only because our ancestors did it, but because we understand that these are the tools, the loopholes of our democracy. We understand the why behind our ancestors' blood, the why behind our ancestors' death, and we understand what's at stake for us and future generations. We vote and we organize. We vote and we organize to make change in leaps and bounds that will liberate us and our future generations. We vote and we organize because we recognize I got to get free and a little bit more this moment. I have to make a decision that will make me more free in this moment than I've ever been before. We vote and we organize because the future for our children and our children's children are at stake. We vote and we organize because we're committed to using our tools as loopholes to make democracy real. We vote and we organize. We vote and we organize. We vote and we organize until our current reality is undone. We vote and we organize until our future is already won. We vote and we organize so we don't have to have any more hashtags about George Floyd or Breonna Taylor's. We vote and we organize so we can breathe deeply again, if not for the first time. We will vote and we will organize until the world that we envision becomes real. We vote and we organize because we are committed to bringing our souls, our S-O-L-E-S, and our souls, our S-O-U-L-S, to the polls, and voting in ways that reduce harm, restore lost rights, and reimagine our collective future. Let us commit together our minds, our bodies, and our souls to this practice of freedom for ourselves and generations yet to come.
Yes.
Woo!
I know. Yes. Outstanding. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Brother Demetrius. This has been amazing. I have been over here stomping and banging behind this computer like I'm back in church, and you really brought us home. Thank you so much. This was marvelous. Thank you for wrapping us up. And for everyone in our audience today, please, please, please do as Brother Demetrius has said, and please bring your souls to the polls, because that is really what we have to do this November, because it is absolutely critical. Our lives are depending on it in this moment. And so I just want to thank you, brother, for giving us all of this strength and fortitude to do and to carry out our duty in the way that we need to. You're vastly appreciated. And I just want to take us to our closing today. Folks, please show my brother love in the chat box. Talk to him in the chat box. Brother Demetrius, if you could leave your contact information in there, that would be awesome, so folks can get a hold of you and just, you know, give you your roses right now. I'm gonna close this session down for us. Thank you for everyone who has tuned in to Policy to Revolution. You all are wonderful. You all are amazing for sticking with us throughout this time. We wanted to give you all just some of the tools so that you all are not guided by misinformation, and that you all are empowered to make your choice, and just also understanding that your vote, it matters, it's needed, it's critical to everyone's survival. Please follow our core group members on social media. You can find them at Brotherhood of Elders Network, at Eastside Cultural Center, East Oakland Collective, at OCCURNOW, and at the Unity Council. If you all have any questions, any comments, please email us at Eastside Anti-Displacement@gmail.com. You all are amazing. Thank you.
And show up next Thursday, the 10th, for round 2.
Awesome. Yes. Please contact Brother Demetrius through www.demetriusburnett.com. Please tune in to what him and his wife are doing. His wife is also a dear friend. If you have anyone who needs any type of virtual tutoring, Miss Haynes Burnett is all about that. Zion Learning is all about that. And if you need to connect with us, you can follow us on social media. I have everyone's emails, and so please stay tuned for our post-event activations. Come see us next Thursday, same time, same place. We got another fire set of teach-ins for you all, and we are just happy to be in this space and to serve. Thank you all so much.